Hello, everyone. Tonight we are stepping into a gilded palace in the heart of Paris right as the candles are being lit. The powder is flying and the vinegar is just starting to steam. You're not a tourist here. You're the main character. You're standing in your chamber, feet bare on polished wood, while a silver basin sits nearby, brimming with warm water and sharp, sour wine vinegar. Your valet hovers beside it, tongs in hand, dropping dried orange peel and marigold petals into the bath like a garnish on some strange aristocratic soup. This is what getting ready looked like in 1765, and no, it doesn't make much more sense close-up. But the wildest part? You probably won't survive this. Not because of guillotines or revolutions, but because your whole approach to hygiene is quietly trying to kill you. In this world, water is dangerous. Soap is suspicious. Cleanliness is theater. And the only thing standing between you and the full weight of 18th century French filth is vinegar. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and what time it is where you are. I love seeing how many of us are drifting off together from different corners of the world. Now turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soft background music, and let's enjoy our evening ride together. You shuffle toward the bath. Not too fast, the floor is slick from that earlier lemon oil buffing, and your silk slippers are more for status than traction. Your valet bows slightly as you near the basin, his face utterly unreadable. He is probably counting the seconds until he can dash off to scrub someone else's feet with rose vinegar. You step into the bath, and the first thing you feel is heat followed immediately by that unmistakable nose-wrinkling tang. The vinegar hits your skin like a memory you never had. Sharp, clean, sharp again. Somewhere between pickled vegetable and expensive potion, and yet comforting. There's something about the sourness that feels protective. It slices through the perfume-clouded air of the room and tells you you are doing the right thing, because tonight you are expected. Not just socially but olfactorily. Everyone will be sniffing. You cannot smell like a person. You must smell like vinegar with ambitions. This bath is not designed to clean you, not really. Not in the way we think about it now. It's more like a ritual deodorizer, an acidic aura booster. It tells people, I took effort, I followed the ritual. I have staff who boiled lemons and scraped beeswax and stirred thyme into a porcelain pot. You're not so much clean as symbolically clean. And that's what French noble life is in the 1700s. Symbolism? Everything, your powdered wig, your taffeta sleeves, your glass of claret wine at exactly 3 fingers from the brim is a coded signal. You don't wash because washing is for people who have to be clean. Farmhands, prostitutes, surgeons. Real cleanliness implies real dirt. You, meanwhile, must only ever be fragrantly sanitized. The bath itself is shallow. There's barely enough water to cover your calves, and your valet has draped towels over your knees like some limp aristocratic bib. He begins ladling the vinegar water up your arms, slow and practiced. You're trying to relax, but the smell has gone from charmingly herbal to aggressively salad. You ask what's in it today. And he lists ingredients like a recipe: white wine vinegar, dried lavender, mint, sage, alum salt, some crushed rosemary. Just a hint of turpentine, but only the kind you inhale. For the nerves, he says, without making eye contact. The truth is, vinegar's been around forever. Roman soldiers drank it diluted in water, called it posca. Medieval doctors prescribed it for everything from fleas to melancholy. And by the 1700s, the French elite had taken that folk wisdom, dipped it in gold leaf, and turned it into spa day protocol. Vinegar is everywhere in your routine. You rinse your mouth with it. You soak combs in it. You freshen lace with vinegar mist. If your wig itches, you dab vinegar on your scalp and hope for the best. You even keep a little vinaigrette vial in your pocket, a perforated pomander filled with vinegar-soaked sponge to hold under your nose in case someone lower walks by. Historians still debate whether this vinegar craze was actually useful for hygiene, or if it just gave everyone a pleasant-smelling illusion while bacteria threw a party behind the scenes. Some say the acidic pH helped neutralize odors and even ward off lice. Others argue that unless you followed it with real scrubbing, which you don't, it just shifted the stink from sweaty noble to sweaty noble marinated in artisanal brine. You lean back as your valet massages your shoulders with a vinegar-soaked cloth. There's no soap, because soap is for laundresses and peasants. It strips the oils, they say it makes your skin vulnerable. And heaven forbid you appear vulnerable. The room smells like the inside of a spice chest. The warmth makes you drowsy. You try not to think about the layers of powder on your face, the 3-day-old rouge caked into your cheeks, or the fact that you haven't washed your back since the king sneezed in public last month. But hey, there's mint in the vinegar. That counts. As you dry off with linen warmed by the fire, your valet begins prepping your toilette. Perfumed starch for your cravat. A dab of civet musk under your ear, lemon vinegar hand lotion. It is not about removing the old, it's about layering on the new until the scent becomes story. You are now ready to be seen. You smell like a citrus orchard that got caught in a thunderstorm. You are confident. Confusing, slightly flammable, but most importantly appropriate. You leave your chambers and descend into the flickering candlelight of the salon where music is playing and everyone is pretending not to look at everyone else. You pass a duchess who smells like basil and nail polish remover, and you both nod silently, acknowledging the shared absurdity of your lives. And somewhere deep under the perfume, the powder, the civet, and the lace, you start to wonder, what exactly are we all trying to wash away? You descend into the marble halls of Versailles with all the pomp and silence of a painting come to life. The air is dense, not just with perfume and gossip, but with a smell that no one talks about above a whisper. It's not foul exactly. It's just lived in. A kind of floral decay hanging beneath the heavy velvet drapes, settling in the folds of brocade and curling between powdered wigs. Someone nearby smells of cinnamon and mold. You hope it's intentional. You make your way through the hall of mirrors, glass on one side, gold on the other. This is the nerve center of French aristocracy, the most elegant hallway in Europe, and it smells like boiled cabbage. You glance sideways. A marquis leans against a pillar, lifting a sachet of crushed clove and rose vinegar to his nose like a man warding off evil spirits. And honestly, he might be, because Versailles, for all its glory, reeks. You are surrounded by people who rarely wash. There are no working toilets in the way you'd recognize. Courtiers relieve themselves behind curtains, under stairwells, even in fireplaces. Chamber pots overflow and servants can't empty them fast enough. The smell lingers no matter how much rosemary vinegar they splash across the flagstones. So why doesn't anyone just bathe? Because here's the kicker, bathing is seen as dangerous. The idea of water opening the pores, allowing disease to enter the body, is widely believed even by physicians. Doctors warn that washing too frequently can weaken your constitution. If you must bathe, make it brief, tepid, and preferably in vinegar, which they say will seal the skin against poisonous air. Think of it like closing a window during a storm, except the storm is typhoid. You shift uncomfortably in your polished shoes, still damp from your bath. You're starting to sweat again, and it's only been half an hour, but you can't let them see. Nobility is a performance. You must glide, float, sparkle, never perspire, never itch. And absolutely never admit you're sitting in a room that smells like expired cheese. Instead, everyone leans into perfume. You pass a woman whose scent trail is so intense, it momentarily resets your sense of direction. It's jasmine, violet, something acidic, maybe vinegar, maybe terror. She raises a fan to her face and eyes you over the top. You bow. So far, no one's fainted. You're doing great. Back in your own quarters, a few weeks ago, you read a treatise by a royal physician claiming vinegar fumigation can protect against plague. They used it to disinfect coins, wash hands, even wipe down furniture. You also heard about the perfumed vinegar cloths being hung in the chimneys to filter out bad air. There's an entire subculture of scent management going on here, and vinegar is right at the center of it. Historians still debate whether nobles were aware of how unclean they really were, or whether they truly believed they were doing enough. Some suggest the rituals were more about class than cleanliness. If a poor person used vinegar, it was peasant folk medicine. If he did it, it was hygienic sophistication. The fear underlying all this, the true engine of the vinegar bath, is miasma theory, the belief that disease spreads through bad smells. Not germs, not viruses. Just air gone wrong. That's why every hallway here has bowls of herbs. Why courtiers carry vinaigrettes. Why you're still burping up lemon vinegar from that breakfast gargle. And that fear, it's everywhere. You pass a royal footman tossing lavender vinegar onto a stairway to mask something unspeakable. Another sprays a scented mist near a curtained alcove. You hear whispers about someone collapsing during a salon reading, face first into a cushion soaked with balsamic and wormwood. A courtier nearby mutters, "Too much cinnamon, not enough sage." You keep walking, you're starting to feel lightheaded. Not from the smell, necessarily, but from the sheer performance of it all. You've spent half the day preparing to appear like someone who doesn't need to prepare. And now, here you are, sweating delicately beneath 3 layers of wool and lace. A lady in blue breezes past you, and you catch a whiff of lilac vinegar. It's beautiful and brief, like a ghost in passing. She disappears around a corner and leaves only the scent behind. You wonder how long she spent steeping the flowers, measuring the vinegar, testing the ratios. This is artistry. This is warfare. There are no bathrooms at the ball tonight. Just screens, benches, and attendants with vinegar cloths to mop the unexpected. You glance at the floor, polished, yes, but scratched and stained. It tells a story. Of spills, of slips, of humans pretending they're something else. There's a myth, probably not true, but still delightful, that Louis XIV bathed only twice in his life. Whether that's accurate or not, it captures the spirit of the era. Bathing is weird. Deodorizing is divine. So you press forward, your own scent blending with the thousands around you. Sweat, powder, violets, vinegar. It's overwhelming but somehow comforting. A human soup. You reach the edge of the ballroom. Inside, chandeliers flicker, violins trill, and powdered faces glow in candlelight. Everyone here smells like something on purpose. You straighten your cuffs, lift your chin, and take a deep breath. Vinegar. Always vinegar. You step into the ballroom. And it's like walking into a still life with a soundtrack, every face frozen in polite delight. Every footstep perfectly rehearsed, every scent a carefully curated blend of vinegar and ambition. The floor creaks faintly beneath your polished shoes, and you're immediately enveloped in a cloud of aromas. This is the height of elegance. This is what luxury smells like when no one showers. Someone laughs nearby, high-pitched, powdery, and you catch a swirl of what you think might be tarragon vinegar, or maybe fennel. Either way, it makes your nose twitch. You force a small smile, the kind that says, "Ah yes, how amusing," when really you're just trying to breathe through your mouth without looking like a trout. To your left, 2 gentlemen are deep in discussion about the latest scandal involving a duchess and her vinegar pearls. Apparently, she commissioned tiny glass beads filled with rose vinegar to sew into her corset lining. One broke during a heated game of lansquenet, and now the entire salon smells like a fruit salad that lost its way. You nod politely and drift toward the refreshment table, though calling it that feels generous. The punch is tepid. The pastries are more decorative than edible. And right beside the sugared almonds is a bowl of handkerchiefs steeped in spiced vinegar. For the guests, for the smell. This is normal. You dab your own handkerchief knit in white wine vinegar mixed earlier by your valet and press it against your lips. Not because you're overcome with emotion, but because someone in the crowd just walked past wearing a combination of musk and what can only be described as expired celery. It's strange. Vinegar here is everywhere, and nowhere at once. It's not just in the baths or the sprays, it's a social tool, a boundary line. If your vinegar is steeped in lilac and wrapped in silk, you're noble. If it's simply vinegar, you're peasant. If you smell like vinegar without the flowers, you're probably about to be asked to leave. Historians still debate whether the French elite genuinely believed their scented vinegar concoctions were effective, or if it was just another layer of conspicuous consumption. After all, you weren't just deodorizing, you were showing off your access to imported spices, rare herbs, and apothecaries with an eyebrow permanently raised. You turn as a countess passes, her skin dewy with what looks like vinegar-based rouge. It glistens unnaturally in the candlelight, and you realize she's perspiring. Bold move, you admire it. Back in your bath chamber earlier today, you had your first introduction to the world of toilet vinegar. That's not a joke. Vinegar de Toilette is the name equal parts beauty product and personal statement. Each blend was tailored. Some claimed to invigorate the senses. Others were meant to protect the spirit. A few were allegedly strong enough to cure heartbreak. Yours tonight includes rosemary, citrus peel, marjoram, and a splash of brandy. The effect is somewhere between herbal apothecary and a cleaning product having an identity crisis. You look around the ballroom and start to recognize the signs. The subtle press of a vinaigrette to the nose. A sudden wave of cinnamon and lavender signaling someone's fear of the person who just entered. A servant slipping behind the curtain with a bucket of vinegar-soaked sawdust to refresh the floor, they say, but probably also to cover up something unmentionable. It's all part of the same ballet. No one says the word stench, but everyone is dancing around it. A baron sidles up to you with a grin, holding out a tiny bottle. Thieves' vinegar, he whispers conspiratorially. You've heard of it? You have. Of course, every noble has. Legend says during a plague outbreak, a band of thieves robbed infected homes without getting sick. When caught, they revealed their secret, a vinegar infused with garlic, herbs, and vinegar steeped under the full moon. Did it work? Who knows? Did it smell? Absolutely. Like regret and regret's older cousin, shame, you take a whiff. It's pungent, very defensive. Like it could repel both disease and conversation, you nod. A classic, you say, because that's what you're supposed to say. The baron nods solemnly, then vanishes back into the crowd, leaving behind an invisible trail of oregano and dread. Somewhere behind you, someone sneezes. A hard one. Everyone freezes. A split second later, there's a flurry of motion handkerchiefs pressed, vinaigrettes lifted, sleeves pulled over noses. One woman visibly swoons. Another mumbles a prayer. And for a brief moment, the party dips into a quiet vinegar-scented panic. Then the music swells, and the performance resumes. You sip your punch. It tastes slightly off. Maybe someone mixed up the vinegar again. You think back to the rituals, how you stood earlier that afternoon while your valet prepared your skin with a vinegar compress. How he explained that it tightens pores, repels noxious airs, and leaves a bright impression on anyone who dares get close. He said it with the same tone someone might use to describe a military strategy. And maybe it is. Maybe all of this perfumed battlefield is just one long, drawn-out war against the body. Its smells. Its functions. It's reminders that no matter how many pearls you sew into your collar, you are a mammal in a very warm room. You notice a young man across the room discreetly dabbing his underarms with a cloth. His eyes lock with yours. You both nod. A moment of understanding. A silent alliance. The musicians pick up tempo. The dancing begins again. The room pulses with movement, silk swishing, fans fluttering, powdered heads nodding to rhythms that barely mask the collective effort to not breathe too deeply. And through it all, the vinegar persists. You slip away from the ballroom just after your third awkward curtsy and the fifth time someone confused your scent for pickled quince. Your head is spinning, your feet are sore, and your linen collar is beginning to wilt with the weight of sweat, perfume, and vinegar steam. You need air though, ironically. That's the one thing no one at Versailles really trusts. Out in the corridor, a cooler breeze greets you. It's laced with lavender vinegar and wood smoke. You breathe it in like a secret and let your eyes adjust to the dimmer light. For a moment, it's almost peaceful. You walk slowly, trailing a hand along the silk-covered wall, listening to your own heartbeat and the muffled echo of violins behind the doors. Then you pass a servant carrying a large metal bowl inside. Vinegar with floating herbs and a stick of cinnamon bobbing lazily on top. He's heading toward the royal bedchambers. You nod. He nods. Neither of you comments on the fact that someone somewhere has probably just fainted again. This is your moment to reflect, to pull back the layers. Because while the parties are showy and the perfumes are loud, what's underneath it all is a quiet panic. Everyone is pretending. Everyone is afraid. And vinegar, humble and sharp, has become the most trusted ally in a world that doesn't yet understand why people get sick only that they do. Let's go back a little further to the not-so-sparkling roots of this trend. Centuries before the court of Versailles perfected its vinegar ballet, ancient civilizations were already singing its praises. Roman physicians prescribed vinegar as a treatment for wounds. Greek scholars swore by it for digestion and mental clarity. Even in medieval monasteries, vinegar was stored beside holy water because, depending on the day, you might need either to stay alive. It wasn't just for washing either. Vinegar was for rinsing the mouth, wiping down tools, clearing out earwax, and even freshening breath. The list goes on. It was both potion and protection. You didn't just use vinegar. You believed in it. But in France, something changed. During the waves of plague and smallpox and mysterious fevers that rolled through the countryside, vinegar took on a new role. It became ritual, spiritual. You didn't just bathe in it to feel clean, you did it to shield yourself from death. Historians still debate whether these vinegar practices were rooted more in science or superstition. Some argue they were based on real antimicrobial properties. Others say it was pure psychological comfort, a way to pretend you had some control when everything else smelled like doom. You reach a corner alcove where someone has set out a tall glass jar. Inside, sprigs of rosemary, lemon rind, crushed mint, and of course white wine vinegar. The small card reads, "Do not drink." You're not tempted, but the fact that the sign exists suggests someone was. You sit for a moment on a velvet bench that's seen better centuries. A portrait of a duchess looms above you, her face powdered like sugar, her eyes distant. You wonder what she smelled like, not in a weird way, just historically. Did she also wear cloves behind her ears? Did she gargle with sage vinegar before a banquet? Did her servants mop the marble floor in cinnamon water to impress her cousin from Lyon? Probably. You're starting to realize that vinegar wasn't just a hygiene solution, it was an identity. The type of vinegar you used said everything about you. Apple cider vinegar was rustic, wine vinegar was sophisticated. Herb-infused vinegar? Now you were showing off, and there were rules. Oh, so many rules. You couldn't just slather it on like lotion. No, it had to be diluted just so 1 part vinegar, 3 parts spring water unless you were treating a rash, in which case it was 2 to 1 unless the rash came with fever. Then you added sage and waited until the moon was waning. Yes, vinegar had lunar instructions. Of course it did. You shift slightly, listening as a group of courtiers passes behind you, their voices hushed and conspiratorial. You catch a snippet. Someone is experimenting with cedar vinegar on their dog. It's unclear whether the dog requested this. Your skin still tingles faintly from your own bath earlier, brisk affair involving a shallow copper tub, a scrubbing mitt, and a valet who seemed a little too enthusiastic about exfoliation. The water was infused with white wine vinegar and thyme. You smelled like a salad for the rest of the afternoon, but at least you weren't accused of having indelicate humors. You lean back, eyes half closed, and remember how your tutor once described the 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Balance those and you're healthy. Let one slip and suddenly you're weeping into your soup or hallucinating you're made of glass. Vinegar, they claimed, could rebalance the system. Soothe the bile, cool the temper. Some even said it could ward off melancholia if you inhaled the steam while reciting poetry. You tried it once. It gave you hiccups and made your maid cry. You open your eyes again and notice a small brass dispenser built into the wall beside you. It's labeled Vinegar Deurgence. Emergency vinegar. The idea that this is considered essential tells you everything you need to know about this place. A footman enters from the opposite hall, spritzing the air with a feathered atomizer. The scent hits you like a dream: rosemary, burnt orange, vinegar, and something faintly like soap. He nods politely and disappears again. The smell lingers. For a fleeting moment, it feels sacred. Not because you're clean, but because you've convinced yourself you are. That's the power of ritual, and of vinegar. You rise, smoothing your coat, and begin walking back toward the ballroom. The music is louder now, so are the perfumes. But somehow, through the chaos and clashing scents and nervous laughter, there's a clarity, a sharpness, a bite. You're ready to face them again. You've bathed in vinegar. You've pressed your handkerchief to your lips. You smell like nobility and just a hint of salad. You return to the ballroom, this time with a keener nose and a trained suspicion of every passing breeze. The smell of vinegar doesn't just live here, it reigns. Every swirl of perfume, every elegant fan flap is a declaration. I'm clean, I'm safe, and I know how to steep things in herbs. Your footsteps echo as you re-enter the gilded hive of powdered wigs and whispered gossip. Someone's brought out a tray of vinegar wafers, delicate little biscuits infused with rose-scented vinegar, intended to freshen the breath and clear the brain. You try one. It tastes like regret wrapped in a flower petal. It's fascinating, really. You'd expect a culture that's practically marinating itself in scented acid to be a little more hygienic. But no. Beneath the vinegars and florals and heavy face powders, you know the truth. Bathing in France during this era was rare. Not non-existent, but rare. And it's not because they didn't want to be clean. It is because they were terrified of what water might do to them. You walk past a cluster of women debating whether a full-body bath might open the pores to disease. One insists it's dangerous to submerge oneself more than once a month. Another says she knows a woman who bathed twice in 1 week and now claims to see ghosts. Everyone murmurs tragic as they sip their wine. Historians still debate whether the fear of water came from the miasma theory, the belief that bad air causes illness, or if it was a holdover from earlier religious traditions that viewed nakedness and cleanliness as morally complicated. Either way, people believe that water could be just as dangerous as dirt. So instead of soap and water, you had the grand toilette. Not a toilet, a ritual. A carefully orchestrated morning routine involving dry brushing, scented cloths, and yes, vinegar rub-downs. You'd stand in your chemise while a servant dabbed you with linen soaked in infused vinegar, each dab pretending to scrub something away while not disturbing your hairstyle or sense of superiority. And this is where things get inventive. The royal court developed vinegar-based cosmetic waters with names like Eau de Carmes, Eau de Lavande, and Eau de Reine de Hongrie. Each was a blend of herbs, alcohol, and vinegar aged just long enough to sting your nostrils and impress your enemies. You remember standing still that morning while your valet anointed your temples with lavender vinegar. For mental clarity, he said. Then he rubbed a mint-infused solution behind your knees, for calmness and circulation. Then he offered you a clove and cinnamon blend for attracting attention. You asked what kind of attention. He smiled too long. The more you learn, the clearer it becomes. French nobles didn't just bathe in vinegar to clean themselves, they layered it like armor. It was medical, cosmetic, magical, and social. A multi-tool of the anxious elite. You pass a man now leaning against a marble column, fanning himself with a card soaked in basil vinegar. He looks smug. You recognize him Marquis something. Known for inventing nose wine, a concoction of vinegar, lemon zest, and crushed petals that you snort lightly to awaken the senses. He once claimed it cured his ennui. You suspect it just made him sneeze dramatically. Your own bottle of vinegar lies snug in your coat pocket, a personal vinaigrette no bigger than your thumb. Silver, engraved, and filled with a blend of rosemary, orange peel, and something called angelica root. You're not sure what angelica is, but it smells like a priest having a picnic. You glance around. These people, for all their powder perfection, live in fear. Fear of smells, fear of sickness, fear of each other. And in that vacuum of knowledge and hygiene, vinegar has become the patchwork solution. Even the architecture reflects it. In some noble homes, there are shelves built into the walls just for holding bottles of vinegar water. Bowls of vinegar sit beneath paintings to absorb bad air. Some even hang vinegar-soaked ribbons from chandeliers, letting them sway gently and dispense invisible reassurance. You stroll past a pair of musicians retuning their instruments and notice they each wear tiny vinegar amulets pendants with absorbent wicks inside, replenished each morning. One smells like rosemary, the other like a headache in blossom form. And it's not just the people. The furniture gets the treatment too. Upholstery is brushed with vinegar to discourage moths. Wardrobes are lined with vinegar paper to preserve lace. Even the cutlery has been known to get a light vinegar rinse to ward off the invisible spoilage of the table. Tonight, the guests are not just wearing their vinegar, they're exhaling it, radiating it, practically vibrating with it. The room hums with acidic energy. You feel a tap on your shoulder. It's a young noblewoman, perhaps 17, with a beauty patch shaped like a crescent moon and an eyebrow arched in permanent curiosity. She gestures to your vinaigrette. Orange blossom? She asks. Angelica? You reply. Ooh, daring. She opens her fan, revealing slits in the folds, each filled with tiny strips of linen soaked in jasmine vinegar. You fan yourself politely and try not to sneeze. Then she leans in close and whispers, I put a drop behind my ears, keeps the gossips away. You both laugh quietly, and for a moment you understand the appeal. The intimacy of the ritual. The shared superstition. The vinegar isn't just armor. It's language, a way to say things without saying them. The music shifts again faster, lighter. The crowd drifts toward the center of the room like iron filings drawn to a magnet. You stay where you are, swaying gently, letting the warmth and the scents blend into a single blur. As your eyes close briefly, you wonder what modern people would make of this. Imagine walking into a room where everyone smells like a medicinal salad. Would they call it barbaric? Quirky? Revolutionary? You'll never know. But here in this room of gloved hands and vinegared hearts, you belong. You drift toward the edge of the ballroom again, not quite leaving, not quite staying, orbiting like a satellite around the gravitational pull of lace and gossip. The vinegar tang is thicker now, mixing with sweat and powdered wig flour, forming an invisible fog of anxious elegance. You find yourself beside a low buffet table, where glasses of chilled rosewater and sugared almonds are arranged with terrifying precision. Nearby, a porcelain bowl sits quietly, filled with pale green liquid. A placard reads, Vinegar et l'absinthe for digestion and optimism. You raise a brow. That's quite a combo. But now the thought gnaws at you. Why so much vinegar? Why this obsession that's both cosmetic and medical, both performance and panic? The answer begins, oddly enough, with fear, specifically fear of smell. To live as a noble in 17th and 18th century France was to exist in a world of invisible dangers. You couldn't see disease, you couldn't name bacteria, but you could smell decay. And to the minds of the time, smell wasn't just offensive, it was dangerous. This is where the idea of miasma takes root. Not metaphorically, literally. Miasma theory, the belief that disease traveled through foul air, wasn't some fringe idea. It was the dominant model of disease across Europe. If something smelled bad, it meant it was unhealthy, dangerous, maybe even deadly. And so, the nose became your frontline defense system. Historians still debate how seriously the French court took the science behind miasma. Some suggest it was more about maintaining status and image. No one wanted to appear unclean. Others argue it was genuine panic in an age where illness could take a city in days. The truth is probably both. Image and illness became one. And so the court bathed itself not in soap and water but in antidote air. Vinegar, sharp and acidic, was believed to cut through miasma. If bad smells were bad spirits, vinegar was the sword. You didn't just want to cover the stench of disease, you wanted to neutralize it, purify the space, protect your lungs. You walk slowly now, recalling stories you've heard from court physicians. One claimed vinegar could kill plague vapors within 4 feet. Another sold vinegar sprays made with ground emeralds, promising immunity through luxury. You're pretty sure it just made people sparkle while coughing. Even servants wore vinegar-soaked scarves tied tightly around their faces, a kind of proto-mask. You once saw a maid faint in the kitchen, not from illness, but because she doubled the vinegar dose and accidentally made herself lightheaded every time she exhaled. There were vinegar stations scattered throughout the palace, tiny alcoves with saucers of vinegar and herbs, placed near doorways and windows. During outbreaks, nobles walked with pomanders, small orbs filled with spiced vinegar-soaked cloth, dangled from chains and waved discreetly under the nose when the air felt suspicious. You remember the story of the 4 Thieves vinegar, a legendary concoction made by a gang of grave robbers who supposedly bathed in herbs and vinegar before looting plague victims, and survived. The recipe, a mix of garlic, lavender, sage, and vinegar, became wildly popular at court. Everyone from duchesses to doormen kept a bottle. Of course, historians can't agree on whether the thieves ever existed. It's likely an urban legend wrapped in marketing. But the name stuck, and suddenly stealing from the dead had a signature scent. Tonight, you see the legacy everywhere. A gentleman tucks a vinegar-infused lace handkerchief into his waistcoat. A young lady dabs a bit behind her knees. Even the footmen have been instructed to lightly mist the corridors with aromatic vinegar every hour on the hour. Because one never knows. You lean against a pillar, watching the candles flicker in the mirrors, and think about how this obsession must feel to someone outside the court. Ridiculous? Maybe, but also deeply human. Because at its core, this isn't just about vinegar. It's about control. When the world is chaotic, when plagues sweep in without warning, and doctors wear beaked masks that look like nightmares, you reach for whatever makes you feel anchored. And vinegar was easy, cheap, accessible, believable. You take out your own vinaigrette again and open it just a crack. The scent of orange peel and rosemary reaches you like a whispered reassurance. You close it, suddenly self-conscious, but not before someone catches your eye. It's the same noble woman from earlier, the one with the jasmine fan. She raises her eyebrow slightly. A shared smirk, a nod. The vinegar bond is real. Later, after a few formal dances and one questionable flirtation involving a shared goblet of cinnamon clove tonic, you make your way toward one of the lesser halls. The noise dims. You pass by a corridor lined with portraits, nobles long gone, their faces eternal in oil, probably smelling faintly of vinegar even now. In a niche, there's a small wooden box with a carved inscription, "Pour purifier les pensées," for purifying thoughts. Inside, dried lavender, chamomile, and a sliver of soaked sponge. You don't know if it works, but you press your fingers to the box anyway, just in case. Because that's what this whole dance is about. Ritual, symbol, the belief that if you do something, no matter how small, no matter how sharp smelling, it might make a difference. A servant walks by, balancing a tray of vinegar tinctures. You catch the label on one, Vinegar de Saint Denis, for dreams and stomachaches. The fact that those two are linked seems perfectly reasonable now. You continue walking. The hallway smells cleaner than it should. Not clean like bleach, clean like memory. Sharp, familiar, safe. You can't help but wonder. Will future generations remember this smell? Will they scoff at it? Recreate it for museums? Sell it in vintage candle lines? Or will they understand what it really meant? A little bottle of hope, tucked in silk pockets. Shared behind fans. Passed along through centuries in whispers and rituals and the quiet belief that maybe this time you'd survive the season. You're back near the mirrored walls now, watching reflections of powdered faces blur in the candlelight like ghosts arguing softly over fashion choices. Somewhere behind you, someone's debating the merits of soaking pearls in vinegar for radiant skin. You don't even blink at that anymore. You've accepted it. This place runs on vinegar. But the obsession didn't appear from nowhere. Tonight, you start noticing the deeper roots, the way French nobles inherited their vinegar passion from an ancient legacy of medicinal sourness. Roman soldiers drank vinegar mixed with water posca to stay hydrated. Medieval monks preserved herbs in vinegar as early forms of tinctures. And by the time you landed here in the golden age of Versailles vanity, vinegar had evolved into a cultural elixir. It was in everything. You pause beside a plump gentleman who is loudly claiming that vinegar mixed with powdered pearls is the only reason his teeth haven to turn black. He offers a smile to prove it, and you try not to flinch. Down the hallway, a group of ladies sit around a tiny marble table, soaking lace gloves in a rose vinegar bath. One lifts her hand, fingers glistening like glass. To tighten the skin, she explains to her friend, and to frighten away fatigue. Her friend nods, fully convinced. You lean against a carved doorframe, feeling the gentle breeze of fans and preposterous medical theories swirl around you. Because here's the truth, vinegar wasn't just cosmetic, it was medicine. Well, as far as anyone knew at the time. They used it for everything. Fevers, vinegar cloths on the forehead. Toothaches, rinse with clove vinegar, fainting spells. A sniff of mint vinegar from a vinaigrette, followed by swooning stylishly onto a tufted bench. Historians still debate whether these remedies were effective or just aromatic wishful thinking. But the rituals endured, passed down like family secrets hidden in satin-lined drawers. And the medical manuals? Oh, they were wild. You once flipped through a 17th century health guide that recommended a weekly vinegar, purged to relieve the melancholy humors. Another advised mixing vinegar with duck fat to cure baldness. And one particularly confident physician wrote that vinegar foot baths could reverse hysteria and restore the womb to its rightful position. You try not to think too hard about that last part. Even the royal apothecary got in on the action. You remember the time he brought out his prized Vinegar de sept vertus, the vinegar of 7 virtues. He said it cured nearly everything. Cough, spoils, jealousy, and stagnant thoughts. It smelled like something between a salad and a seance. Nobles hoarded these bottles like modern influencers hoard skincare serums. Some had cabinets filled with vinegars labeled by ailment, headache, mood imbalance, liver irritation, troublesome cousins. Others kept private vinegar books where they recorded their favorite blends, much like secret family recipes. You start noticing patterns. Women carried small glass vials hidden in their corsets, close to the heart. Men dipped vinegar tablets into brandy as an after-dinner revitalizer. Children had their cribs lined with lemon vinegar cloth to prevent nightmares. The idea was simple. Vinegar healed what couldn't be seen. You walk past an open chamber where 2 elderly nobles sit with their feet in matching buckets of thyme vinegar, sighing with something like reverence. One mutters, "Every ache in my bones is just an excuse for a stronger infusion." The other hums in agreement. A younger footman rushes by, nearly tripping over your shoes. He's holding a scroll marked with a wax seal, the physician's sigil. You catch a glimpse of the words, "Vinegar tincture for fevers of unknown origin." You continue on. The deeper into the palace you go, the more experimental it gets. Behind a velvet curtain, a noblewoman dips her earrings into a small bowl. "Keeps away ear whispers," she says cryptically. In another alcove, a gentleman has rubbed basil vinegar on his temples to ward off overthinking. Frankly, it smells like overcompensation. The strangest might be the couple whispering about a new craze vinegar inhalation, a fresh trend. You soak a cloth, drape it over your head, and breathe in deeply while reciting calming Latin verses. It's part spa day, part summoning ritual. You chuckle softly, and yet the devotion is real. These aren't just habits, they're expressions of hope. Of people trying to outsmart death with style. You respect it, you also find it deeply absurd. Two things can be true. As you turn another corner, you're struck by something that hadn't occurred to you until now. For all their wealth, French nobles were deeply vulnerable. They lived in fear of unseen forces, diseases, curses, drafts of cold air, poorly mixed rouge. And without modern medicine or reliable science, vinegar became a kind of lifeline, an illusion of control, a ritual of reassurance. They clung to it not because it worked, but because it was something. And sometimes, something is enough to keep you upright at a party where someone's wig could hide lice. Someone's perfume could cause a sneezing fit, and someone's medical advice might be based on what their cat did last Tuesday. You pause by a set of heavy curtains, catching your breath and listening to the sounds of the main hall. Laughter, music, and the ever-present rhythm of polite coughing. You dab your wrists with a drop from your vinaigrette, letting the rosemary warmth drift upward. You think about the future, how vinegar will shift from panacea to pantry. How modern people will forget its place in powdered courts and plague streets. How one day someone will read about this strange obsession and think it was charming or quaint or weird, and they'll be right. But they'll miss the most important part. That in a world where almost nothing made sense, vinegar gave people just enough belief to face the next day. You slip back into the main corridor like nothing happened, like you didn't just pass a man rubbing vinegar into his scalp while muttering something about moon phases. You keep your expression neutral. At this point, nothing should surprise you. But then again, you've seen a duchess use vinegar to polish her pearls. And earlier, someone claimed vinegar bathwater could heighten musical sensitivity. So, surprise is a relative state now. The music in the ballroom has softened into a genteel lull, a sort of background sigh. Couples sway in half rhythm, fanning themselves while pretending not to notice each other's sweat. And amid the lace and lace-ups and little half-lies, a new ritual emerges. You notice them prepping their skin, not dabbing perfume, not reapplying powder, but patting, pressing, spritzing. Little hand mirrors are held up and tilted, and the telltale glint of small glass vials returns vinegar again, but not just for scent or sickness. No, this is beauty armor. See, French nobles didn't just want to survive the party. They wanted to dominate it. And that meant looking like you just descended from Mount Olympus, powdered and poreless, and preferably glistening faintly under the chandeliers. And vinegar? It was the unsung miracle. You settle beside a pair of women comparing notes. One swears by apple cider vinegar as a toner. The other whispers about a new blend involving lemon peel and egg whites. Tightens the skin so much I can't blink, she says proudly. You try not to look horrified. But it's not just vanity, it's war. These women are navigating social minefields where a pimple is political, where a sweat mark is an invitation to exile. In a world without dermatologists or digital filters, vinegar became the serum of the gods. You start piecing it together. The nobles used vinegar too? 1. Shrink pores. They believed it closed the skin, protecting it from dangerous air, remember miasma? But also it gave the illusion of porcelain. One beauty guide even suggested mixing vinegar with crushed almond shells and scrubbing until the skin sings. 2. Remove blemishes. Freckles, age spots, vinegar compresses. Some even tried to bleach their skin, chasing that ghostly court pallor by applying vinegar paste before bed. Which explains a lot about the blotchy cheeks you saw earlier. 3. Prevent wrinkles. Vinegar lifts the face like fresh corsetry for the cheekbones, someone once told you. You didn't argue because the alternative was listening to them explain it in more detail. Historians still debate how effective any of this was. Some argue vinegar's acidity could actually damage skin over time. Others think it may have had mild antibacterial effects helpful, perhaps in an era without refrigeration or restraint. But everyone agrees, it felt like it worked. And that was half the battle. You pass a gentleman standing rigidly still while a servant mists his face. He catches your glance and offers a half apology. Prevents shine, he says. My forehead could reflect the sun. You raise your eyebrows in solidarity. Shine is the enemy. Just beyond, someone has arranged a miniature beauty station beside the wall. There's a bowl of cool water, a folded cloth, and a little pot labeled Vinegar Cosmetique for evening glow. The line of nobles waiting is longer than the buffet. You lean against the column, the marble cold against your spine, and consider the stakes. In this world, beauty isn't just decorative, it's currency. If your skin is luminous, you're disciplined. If your cheeks are flushed just right, you're alluring but not scandalous. And if your complexion fails you, well, better hope your dowry doesn't, so you do what everyone else does. Soak, pat, wait. A lady nearby blots her neck with something that smells like hibiscus and vinegar. She fans herself and smiles. Makes my collarbones look poetic. You don't question it. Further down the hall, you overhear someone discussing a more experimental method, vinegar steam facials. The idea is to lean over a bowl of hot vinegar water and trap the steam with a towel. Melts the years off, the speaker claims. Though once I melted my eyebrows a little too. You grimace in sympathy. That's the price of glory, apparently. Some nobles even added vinegar to their hair care routines. Mixed with rainwater and rosemary, it was used to brighten the color, remove lice, and banish the scent of melancholy. One particularly fashionable man claimed his curls owed everything to a nightly vinegar rinse and 3 hours of harp music. He was. A lot. You take a moment to think back. The vinegar baths before the party, those weren't just about disease. They were about presentation. Imagine stepping into the world feeling sterilized, lifted, clarified, sharp. You glowed not because your skin was healthier, but because you'd done the rituals. You were walking in proof that you cared. And you realize this is skincare status, just like today, really. Vinegar was their retinol, their serum, their mystery dropper with the elegant label. You chuckle. Somewhere someone's trying to sell you the same thing in a different bottle. You wander again, your mind humming with acid and admiration. You notice little things now, the way people dab their cheeks after a laugh, catching any telltale shine. The soft hiss of vinaigrettes being opened under collars. The shared language of skin rituals exchanged like secret codes. This isn't just about beauty, it's about belonging. You pause beneath a lantern, your own reflection half blurred in the gilded mirror. You take out your little bottle. Just a dab, right under your chin. It bites slightly, then fades into lavender warmth. It doesn't do much, really. But it makes you feel like you're part of the game. That's the point. Outside, the night deepens. The air grows heavier. Somewhere in the ballroom, a violinist strikes a slow chord and the dancers respond with practiced grace. You smooth your coat, adjust your posture, and step back into the crowd refreshed, sharpened, slightly acidic in the best possible way. You're drifting now, more vinegar than human, gliding past powdered elbows and the smell of aging citrus. You've become part of the party, a fixture among fans and whispers. But tonight you start noticing something peculiar, something you hadn't clocked before. Vinegar isn't just for skin or scent, it's for defense. Not war, not swordplay. No one's chucking bottles across the ballroom. This is social defense. The kind of unspoken survival strategy that every noble keeps quietly in their sleeves, sometimes literally. You spot a nobleman pressing a perfumed cloth to his nose as he sidesteps a servant. Not subtle, but effective. He's avoiding something, not just a smell, but a status hazard. Because here's the unvarnished truth of the court. Things look beautiful, but they don't smell beautiful. At least not naturally. Between the sweat trapped beneath layers of brocade, the rarely washed wigs, the chamber pots hidden behind folding screens, and the tragic overuse of musk, you're hit with the reality that the palace stinks. And vinegar? Vinegar is the shield. You edge toward a side hallway, away from the ballroom's growing heat. There, a maid hurriedly dabs vinegar around the hem of a duchess's dress. To keep the rats away, she says, like it's no big deal. You nod like that's perfectly normal. You keep walking. Near the gaming room, two gentlemen are exchanging gossip with small vinaigrettes in their hands, held close like elegant grenades. Each time someone passes, they discreetly lift the silver lids and inhale. It's the 18th century equivalent of hitting your inhaler when the drama gets too thick. You've noticed the ritual before, always subtle, always elegant. Sometimes the vinaigrettes are heart-shaped. Sometimes they're miniature skulls. One had a tiny enamel painting of a cat playing the harp. But they all hold the same thing, a vinegar-soaked sponge, often steeped with herbs or oils. One quick whiff and the world rights itself again. Historians still debate whether these vinaigrettes were primarily medicinal or just a defense against the smell of unwashed nobility. Either way, they became symbols of status. You weren't truly refined unless you could afford to walk through life smelling like your own curated cloud of lemon-thyme panic relief. You turn a corner and nearly walk into a young lady holding a lace handkerchief to her mouth. "Garlic," she says softly, eyes wide with horror. Someone in the West Wing is eating garlic. You offer her a nod of solidarity and keep moving. Because this was the real war at court, not against each other, but against odor. Remember, bathing wasn't frequent. Some nobles believed water could open the skin to evil air. So instead of full body washing, they'd mask the stench with layers of perfume and vinegar. Vinegar, unlike perfume, didn't just cover scent. It cut it, it changed it. A little dash behind the ears, a splash on the inner sleeve, and suddenly you weren't offensive, you were mysterious. Like maybe you just walked through an herbal forest. Or maybe you'd been dabbling in alchemy. Even furniture got the treatment. You pass a fainting couch with a little ceramic dish tucked beneath it rose vinegar, evaporating quietly. A nobleman fans himself as he lounges there, clearly impressed with his own foresight. "It's the only way to nap properly," he tells a nearby marquise who looks both bored and envious. You start keeping track of the subtle vinegar maneuvers. A duchess flares open her fan painted with tiny scenes of ancient Rome, and you catch the glint of a sponge tucked into the folds. Not perfume, clove vinegar, her secret weapon. Later, you pass a row of candles flickering oddly. Turns out they're burning vinegar oil blends, lavender, chamomile, even rosemary. The air smells like a salad course, but somehow elegant. And it's not just for blocking smells. It's to project an identity. You start to see the pattern. The Shire nobles stick with lavender. The loud ones use lemon. The mysterious types dab a little basil vinegar on their gloves and lean in when they speak, waiting for the listener to notice but never explain. It's status, strategy, and seduction all in one whiff. And like every good defense, it has its place in a larger system. At the table, some nobles spritz vinegar on their utensils before a meal. They claim it's for health, but you know it's about avoiding the scent of stale silver. One woman even dips her napkin in vinegar water before gently patting her lips between bites. She's not cleaning. She's signaling, "I'm clean, I'm careful, and I'm not like the rest of you cabbage-breathed clowns." You step outside briefly, needing fresh air. The gardens are lined with citrus trees and heavily trimmed boxwoods. And yes, someone has just tossed vinegar water onto the gravel path. "Keeps the worms down," a gardener mutters. You don't ask questions anymore. On your way back in, a powdered older woman stops you. "You smell civilized," she says, patting your sleeve approvingly. "Keep doing that." You nod. You will, because that's the trick, isn't it? In a court where every eye is watching and every nose is guessing, scent is a language, and vinegar is the dialect of the self-aware. You get the feeling it isn't just about courtly survival. It's about reclaiming the body in a world that tries to decorate, disguise, and ignore it. It's about saying, "Yes, I'm sweating, here's what I'm doing about it." You linger at the edge of the ballroom again, the sound of string instruments floating around you like a dream made of tension and taffeta. The nobles move through the air like slow-motion theater, and you notice how many of them clutch their secret vials, touch their gloves, whisper about someone's breath. It's absurd. It's brilliant. It's Franson lace, holding its breath and sipping vinegar. You feel it before you see it, the soft ripple of panic under the perfume. Something shifts in the energy of the room, like everyone just realized they'd left the oven on. Nobles pause mid-conversation, fans slow in midair, and the string quartet stumbles ever so slightly over a trill. Then you spot it. A footman, red in the face, weaving awkwardly through the ballroom with a copper tray. On it, a single crystal goblet filled with something dark and ominously sour-looking. Everyone tries not to look directly at it, but you know what it is. Someone asked for drinking vinegar. You raise an eyebrow. This isn't the spritz dash at dash on dash or dash risk kind. This is the hard stuff. Drinking vinegar, known as vinaigre de boyer or shrub in certain circles, was both a health tonic and a fashion flex in 18th century France. You sip it in public not because you're thirsty, but because you want people to know your spleen is thriving and your constitution is morally upright. Tonight's brave soul? A marquis in green velvet with a powdered ponytail and no visible shame. He takes the goblet with 2 fingers, swirls the contents like it's fine wine, and downs it in a single, grimace-free gulp. You catch the moment of recoil behind his eyes, respect. He sets the glass down. "Apple cider with mint and black pepper," he says loudly, as if announcing a royal decree. A cleansing palate. A few nobles nod approvingly. One woman faintly swoons, probably because she's hungry, but will let the marquis take the credit. You edge closer, you want to know more. Because here's the thing, drinking vinegar wasn't just about being trendy. It was about purity, internal cleanliness. The vinegar bath may have been for your outer shell, but this was to polish the inside of your machinery. Remember, this was a time when bodily humors were still part of medicine. You didn't just eat food, you balanced energies. Sweet things cooled the bile, bitter things stirred the liver, and vinegar? Vinegar was believed to sharpen the mind, lighten the blood, and regulate ... everything. One pamphlet even claimed that drinking vinegar in the morning prevents melancholia and nighttime ghosts, which, frankly, feels worth a try. You spot a trio of younger nobles gathered in a corner, each holding smaller fluted glasses with pink-hued liquid. One of them giggles between sips. Pomegranate and raspberry. It's practically dessert. You lean in and learn their secret. Fruit shrubs, a mix of vinegar, sugar, and macerated fruit were all the rage. Especially chilled with sparkling water or watered wine. Think of it like proto-soda for people who thought soda might be an instrument of Satan. Historians still debate how widespread drinking vinegar was among the general population. Some argue it was more common in apothecaries and among the health-obsessed elite. Others believe it trickled down to cafes and salons, especially during the summer months, when chilled shrub mixes gave nobles a way to pretend they weren't slowly boiling inside their corsets. What everyone agrees on is that vinegar drinks were medicinal first, fashionable second. Which, of course, made them perfect for the nobility. Because nothing says I'm better than you like turning medicine into lifestyle. You walk past a servant carefully preparing a batch of what looks like lemon basil tonic. She adds a single drop of rose oil and stirs with a carved spoon. Her employer watches closely, correcting the ratios like a chef with an opinion problem. And then there's the alchemy. Some nobles believe specific vinegar blends could alter their moods. Not just for clarity or digestion, but to prepare them emotionally for different social settings. Black currant vinegar for confidence, thyme vinegar for flirtation, white wine vinegar with fennel for banishing regret. A baron nearby tells a long story about a duel that was prevented, because both men shared a vinegar shot beforehand and realized it simply wasn't worth the acid reflux. You're skeptical, but you applaud the drama. Even royalty got in on it. There are whispers that Marie Antoinette's court experimented with vinegar infusions that changed depending on her mood. On tense days, orange blossom and sage. On flirtatious ones, cherry vinegar with cloves. The effect was psychological, sure, but when your job involves navigating palace intrigue with a smile and a spine made of lace, a vinegar shot might be the only thing keeping your nerves from snapping. You pause beside a low table where glass flasks shimmer in candlelight. It's like a vinegar tasting bar. Each carafe is labeled with scripted names: Jardin d'Ivoire, Eclair Cellus, Tonique pour le Courage. You try one, just a sip. It's tangy, herbal, and not as disgusting as you expected. Like a very ambitious cocktail that missed its calling as a salad dressing. You don't hate it. You don't love it. But you feel it. A warmth in your chest, a brightening behind the eyes. Maybe it's psychosomatic. Maybe it's lemon balm. Or maybe it's just the sheer novelty of drinking something that would have horrified your 6th grade self. One of the guests offers you a tip. Drink before you argue. It shortens the conversation. You take mental notes. Not all vinegar drinks were liquid either. Some nobles prepared vinegar jellies, little cubes infused with fruits and flowers, served on silver spoons between courses. Supposedly, they reawakened the senses and restored civility to exhausted tongues. That last part sounds fake. But then you try one apricot and cinnamon and immediately wish you hadn't mocked it. It's delightful. You overhear one man claim that drinking vinegar daily has kept his urges reasonable and his debts invisible. That might be the vinegar talking, or the wine. Someone else mentions a traveling physician who sells aged vinegar elixirs in crystal bottles and claims he hasn't sneezed since 1742. He walks like vinegar lives in his bones, she says admiringly. You're not surprised. Because that's the world you're in now, a place where vinegar is more than a condiment. It's a philosophy, a statement, a potion for poise, and a little glass of pride. You head back toward the ballroom, cheeks flushed from a sip too many. The air feels clearer now somehow, more deliberate. The Marquis in green velvet raises his glass to you in solidarity. You return the nod, your breath carrying notes of thyme and something slightly medicinal. You don't just smell civilized now. You taste it. You know how it goes. The moment you start to feel comfortable, the palace shifts beneath you like a stage being reset. The tempo of the music changes lighter now, almost playful, and the crowd begins to rearrange itself, a swirl of silks, whispers, and vinegar. You wander toward the periphery, where the powder isn't quite so thick and the gossip flows more freely. This is where the real performance happens, not in grand gestures or rehearsed compliments, but in the casual arch of an eyebrow, the careful placement of a gloved hand, the subtext that hangs heavier than the chandeliers. And suddenly, you notice something. Scent politics? Yes, politics has a smell. And vinegar, your trusty companion, is more than a hygiene hack. It's a social signal, a coded message whispered through aromatics. Here, fragrance equals rank, but not just any fragrance. There are hierarchies of smell, just like with jewels or titles. The emperor of odor might be ambergris, but vinegar has its own court of flavors. And you read about to see how nobles used it not only to stand out, but to put others in their place. You pass by a countess brushing rose vinegar onto the edges of her fan. She does it while maintaining eye contact with a rival noble woman. It's not subtle. The rival fans herself faster. You know what that means, dueling aromas. One uses a bright, floral vinegar, soft, romantic, a hint of roses and orange zest. The other responds with a deeper tone, fig and myrrh, earthy, mysterious, possibly overcompensating. You feel like you're watching two perfumed gladiators battle it out in slow motion. Armed with monogrammed handkerchiefs and too many feelings, the court runs on silent wars like these, and vinegar? It becomes your sword. Historians still debate whether nobles consciously weaponized scent in these petty rivalries or if it was a more subconscious power play. But either way, you notice that everyone here is trained in the game. You hear the whispers. She's wearing lavender desperate to look calm. Too much rosemary. She's masking something. Lemon balm? That's for children. Suddenly, your own scent strategy feels woefully under-researched. Did your vinegar imply boldness or desperation? Mystery or mildew? You duck into a salon where a group of nobles are sampling vinegars from an engraved tray like wine flights. Each one is labeled serenity, dominance, elegance, distance. A marquise with eyes like knives chooses dominance and dabs it on her wrists. He'll smell me before I enter the room, she says with unsettling cheer. Another noble counters with distance and whispers, sometimes cold is the most powerful flavor. You're in deep now. This is less a party and more a chemical theater. The blend you choose isn't just about what you like, it's about who you're realigning with. Fruity vinegars suggest youth and optimism. Herbal blends suggest political aspirations. Smoky notes? Often nobles in mourning or those trying to be taken more seriously than their bank accounts would suggest. There is even an emerging trend among certain avant-garde nobles, who dab a bit of onion-infused vinegar at their collars. It says I'm raw, real, and not afraid to be uncomfortable, says one young baron. It also says he might be recently orphaned. Still, it's a vibe. You notice patterns across cliques. The artsy types cluster around mint and lavender-based concoctions. The power players lean into the dark stuffed black currant, vinegar aged in iron casks, even a strange blend that smells faintly of rain and rage. And those trying to blend in? They go for diluted citrus, safe, uncontroversial, vanilla ice cream of vinegars. At the base of it all is the awareness that your scent, chosen carefully, could reshape your narrative. That even in a room full of spoken lies, the real truth drifted in the air. There's even a rumor circulating tonight, probably false, but tantalizing, that someone spiked a rival's vinaigrette with fermented cabbage vinegar. She passed out mid-dance from the smell. Social assassination by salad dressing. It's scandalous. It's also entirely believable. Because the deeper you go into this world, the clearer it becomes. Smell is survival. You remember hearing that the queen had an official vinegar mistress, a woman whose sole job was to manage, curate, and update Her Majesty's vinegar blends. She worked in secret like a perfumer and a spy rolled into one, and she could make or break a reputation with one drop. Imagine a few too many notes of garlic and mint, and suddenly the queen's considered crass and indecisive. A sharp oak vinegar with hints of saffron? Now she's ambitious and impossible to manipulate. That's how seriously this was taken. And yes, there were imposters. Nobles who wore blends above their station, hoping no one would notice. But people always noticed. You pass a conversation already in progress. Did you smell what she was wearing? Oh, she's punching above her class. Balsamic with violet? What is this, Venice? The cruelty is surgical. Fragrance faux pas are remembered longer than bad dancing. One man near the buffet leans in conspiratorially. I once mixed tarragon vinegar with lemon. People thought I was trying to become a bishop. You're not sure what that means, but you nod. Gravely, and it's not just about self-presentation. Smelling someone else's vinegar choices tells you what they're hiding. A young duchess known for her scandalous affairs now wears only one vinegar, time and plain spirit vinegar. Bare, penitent, a clear message that she's reformed or wants everyone to think so. Another noble who was recently passed over for an inheritance has switched from fruity floral vinegars to dark, spicy blends. He's reinventing, someone murmurs. Trying to be dangerous now. You start to appreciate the brilliance of it all. You could lie with your words. You could fake your emotions, but your scent? That was harder to control. Unless, of course, you controlled it completely with vinegar. So you do what anyone would do in your position. You steal a small vinaigrette from an unattended tray. You crack it open. It smells like clove, lemon, and the kind of confidence you could wear into a room full of your enemies. You dab it under your chin. You're not just surviving anymore. You're sending a message. You're barely 2 steps into the corridor when someone stops you with a smile that is just a little too curated. Her fan flicks open like a trapdoor. Her voice drips courtesy, but her eyes, they're hunting for weakness. And what does she notice first? Your scent. Oh, she says, with a polite tilt of the head. Clove and lemon, how ... assertive. You thank her. You hope it came out like a compliment. This is the hidden truth you've been learning all evening. French nobles didn't just bathe in vinegar to smell clean, they bathed in it to project an identity. A weaponized aroma that you carried like armor into any room, any salon, any scandal. And as you slip deeper into this perfumed labyrinth, you realize there's one more layer to this vinegary empire: customization. Not just dabbing a vinaigrette behind your ears and hoping for the best. No, that's child's play. The elite took their vinegar rituals to Baroque extremes. You catch a glimpse of it behind a half-closed door. Nobleman seated in a high-backed chair while his valet mixes vinegar infusions like a cocktail wizard. Dozens of tiny crystal vials are lined up, labeled with meticulous script: juniper, saffron, laurel, cinnamon bark, and even powdered pearl. This is a scent consultation. Because if you want to win at court, you don't just wear vinegar, you curate. You blend it for specific outcomes: a reconciliation dinner, a public apology, a seduction, a political alliance, a masked ball with likely assassins. You never show up in the wrong scent for the wrong moment. It would be like wearing fur to a funeral. Historians still debate how many nobles truly had access to these artisanal vinegar services, or whether it was just a few extremely extra courtiers setting the trends. But there are records of vinegar studios tucked away in noble households with notes, samples, even recipe books passed down like family heirlooms. You peek into one such alcove. The walls are lined with flasks in graduated hues: amber, ruby, smoky gold. A hand-inked note is pinned to the wall, reading, "Do not mix rosemary with basil before tea with the bishop. He'll think you remocking him." There are rules to this art. You've already learned a few. Never wear garlic vinegar indoors unless you're unwell or feigning it. Only the truly powerful can get away with basil in the winter. Violet is reserved for morning unless it's paired with vanilla, which suggests you're over it. Never mix 2 vinegars from the same fruit family unless you're trying to confuse someone. And then there are the seasonal codes. Spring demands floral lightness. Summer invites citrus and herb. Autumn is all spice and smoke. Winter? That's when things get ... risky. A woman in violet walks past you trailing a cloud of rosemary and musk vinegar so bold it makes your nose twitch. Someone near you whispers, her husband's gone to war. She wants everyone to feel it. You believe them. Because in a world where everyone is watched, gossiped about, and silently judged, the one thing you can fully control is your vinegar signature. You step into a powder room and spot a crystal bowl filled with tepid water, a few dried rose petals floating lazily on the surface. Beside it, a small rack of vinaigrettes. This is a refresh station. Not just for cooling off, but for reapplying your scent identity mid-party. A noblewoman walks in, unpins her sleeves with fluid efficiency, and pats vinegar on her pulse points like she's repainting a self-portrait. You're impressed. She notices your admiration and gives you a tip: wrist, neck, and behind the knees. That way it rises and falls as you move. You nod and she's gone. Like a lavender-scented ghost. You try it yourself. Something softer this time, apple cider with a hint of anise. You smell ... complicated. Good complicated. Like a person with a mysterious diary and a manageable amount of debt. You step out and immediately catch the eye of a duke who's been making rounds all evening. He pauses, inhales, nods. Message received. This is what it's all about. Because back then, nobles weren't just bathing in vinegar to avoid stinking. They were crafting an atmosphere. You didn't just wash your body, you washed your persona. It's the early version of personal branding. Like a Twitter bio you can smell. She's confident, mournful, and slightly acidic, just my type. In fact, some nobles went further and developed day-to-night transitions. A bold rosemary-heavy blend for court appearances. A gentle citrus floral mix for meals. And something musky and confusing for late-night poetry readings or casual betrayals. They even made vinegar clocks ornate timepieces built with little compartments that released different scents as the hours passed. That way, your surroundings evolved in rhythm with your mood. It's midnight, cue the frankincense and wine vinegar. You wouldn't be surprised if someone tried to market that today. Of course, this vinegar obsession wasn't limited to nobles themselves. Their servants, valets, and ladies-in-waiting were trained to identify emotional states by scent. A valet could tell when his master was nervous too much vinegar reapplied too quickly. A lady's maid might recognize the scent of desperation just from a dab of thyme in the wrong season. There were even vinegar feints, deliberate deceptions. A noble might wear calming sage and mint when preparing to launch a scandal, or choose sweetness before delivering bad news. A kind of olfactory poker game where your bluff was measured in acidity. One guest near the window leans toward you and says, "The best lie I ever told was with basil. No one saw it coming." You believe them. You pass a servant carrying a velvet box filled with chilled vinegar flakons, like a mobile bar cart, but for your identity. Guests select from them discreetly as they leave. This is not just hygiene, it's reputation management. Because at the end of the night, long after the dancing stops and the fans close, what lingers isn't your name, your lineage, or even your scandal. It's your scent. And whether they'll remember you as sharp and clever, soft and tragic, or bold and slightly unhinged, it all comes down to what vinegar you wore. So you dab on a final drop, let it settle. You're not the same guest who entered hours ago. You're someone worth remembering. You think about leaving just for a moment. Your feet are sore, your mind swirling in vinegar, and frankly, you're not sure if you're still playing the game or being played. But then, like a late-night twist in a dreamy novel, someone pulls you aside and says, "You've heard about the Vinegar Vault, right?" No, you haven't, which is precisely why you follow. Through a narrow passage behind a curtain no one else seems to notice, down a winding corridor lit with lamps that smell faintly of burning rosemary, the air cools. The laughter fades. The sound of powdered shoes shuffling on stone echoes around you. Welcome to the Vinegar Vault, a secret pantry of the aristocracy, where vinegar isn't just a scented accessory. It's a historical archive, a power stash, and a chemical armory. The room you enter is circular, its walls lined with shelves of crystal bottles arranged by century, by region, by emotional intent. It's like stepping into someone's scented diary. The oldest bottles are darkened with age, their labels written in fading Latin, their contents rumored to have touched the skin of kings and conspirators alike. You approach one bottle labeled simply, 1664, the Regency Accord. Your guide, a man with a monocle that doesn't look ironic, leans close and whispers, "That vinegar blend was used to seal a marriage alliance." One whiff of this, and she agreed to the dowry. You ask, was it love? No, he says, just a lot of clove and honey overwhelms the senses. The vault isn't for amateurs. It's for nobles who've trained their noses like sommeliers, who can detect betrayal in basil and flirtation in fig. Each bottle here tells a story. A moment of leverage or a mistake made pungent. There's one labeled, "Private stock not to be worn during Lent," which raises more questions than it answers. And another, "Raspberry Rose, Lady D's Ruin." You're almost afraid to open it. What kind of vinegar could ruin a person, but someone did? And that scent lives here now. Historians still debate whether such vaults existed across all major estates, or if this was something reserved for the top 1% of the 1%. What's agreed upon is that nobles took vinegar far more seriously than modern people take cologne. This was pre-refrigeration, pre-penicillin, pre-Tide Pods. Vinegar meant purity, survival, and if you were rich enough, personality curation at the microbial level. You run your hand along a row of battle blends, formulations designed to invigorate, to embolden, to scare the powdered socks off your opponents in court. One reads, Pine and Iron Negotiation Blend. 1712, a sharp scent meant to intimidate during land disputes. Another, more curious, reads, Juniper and Absinthe, Emotional. Reset, a vinegar so potent it supposedly helped a marquis forget his unrequited love for a duchess with a mustache thicker than his own. And tucked in a quiet corner of the vault, Forbidden Blends, yes, that's what they're called. Some locked in iron cages, others with wax seals that haven't been broken in centuries. One of them is tagged simply, Civet Experiment, Never Again, you don't ask. But your guide, who you now suspect is either a disgraced noble or a wildly overconfident butler, pulls out a bottle he calls the Mask. It was used during high-stakes affairs. Smells like sincerity, but it's all disguise. No heart, just citrus, mint, and the illusion of honesty. He hands it to you. You sniff it. You immediately feel like writing a confession letter. It's terrifying. He laughs and takes it back. Effective, right? Wore it to 6 betrayals myself. You sit down on a velvet bench and try to understand the gravity of where you are. This isn't just an apothecary, it's a sensory time machine. Every bottle here once had a heartbeat attached to it. A motive, a strategy. And each one reflects a noble who didn't just want to survive the court, they wanted to master it. And suddenly you understand. Vinegar was the noble's invisible ink. It wasn't about smelling better. It was about manipulating memory. You might forget a face, you might forget a conversation. But a scent? That stays with you forever. Even modern studies say that smell is more tightly bound to memory than any other sense. You smell cinnamon and you're back in your grandmother's kitchen. You catch whiffs of chlorine and boom swimming lessons at age 8. Now imagine that power used by people trained to wield it like a sword. A perfume might seduce, but vinegar could haunt. You wander deeper into the vault and spot a smaller shelf labeled children's training kits, small vials, simpler blends. Rosemary and lemon for obedience, chamomile and honey for humility. Tiny glass stoppers for tiny glass egos. This is where the noble kids started, scent school. Like Hogwarts, but instead of wands, they learn the difference between civic vinegar and ceremonial vinegar. Your guide gestures to a fraying booklet tied with ribbon. You open it, it's handwritten. A journal of vinegar combinations and what they were used for. 2 drops of basil and wine vinegar before lying to the bishop. Add cinnamon to mask guilt. Clove can fake sincerity if you don't blink too much. You're reading a 300-year-old guide to olfactory deception. It's impressive. Also mildly terrifying. You wonder who wrote it, what scandals they buried, what victories they won by smelling better or just smelling more like someone people trusted. And now you're starting to understand the full scope of why they bathed in this stuff. Because bathing in vinegar wasn't just for cleanliness. It was the priming ritual. The act that aligned body, scent, and narrative before entering the battlefield of noble life. You didn't just wash your body, you rewrote your role. You smell like healing? You're recovering. You smell like thunder and pine? You're ready for revenge. You smell like nothing at all? You're probably about to strike. The vault door begins to creak shut. Your guide bows. Use what you've learned, but choose wisely. A single drop can change your fate. And just like that, you're alone again. The door clicks behind you. And the party still rages above. You reemerge into the main hall like a time traveler, blinking at the brightness, the motion, the sheer scented chaos of the party. You carry something different now, not a bottle or a blend, but a new awareness. Everyone here is playing a deeper game. And tonight, the stakes feel higher. Because tonight isn't just about being seen. It's about being smelled, remembered, and if you're not careful, classified. You pause beside a fireplace where 2 gentlemen are locked in a passive-aggressive battle of olfactory one-upmanship. One wears a cool vinegar of mint and wintergreen. The other's gone full musk and cedar. The air between them could probably dissolve wallpaper. You don't stay long. Instead, you drift toward the music, the flicker of candles, and the quiet cluster of courtiers whispering in coded metaphors. You're beginning to pick up on it now, a language beneath language communicated through vinegar. That duchess brushing her lace gloves with lemon thyme? She's signaling peace. The viscount wearing myrrh and ash? Definitely mourning or pretending to. And that sweet waft of violet and wine? Someone nearby is either in love or manipulating someone who is. Historians still debate whether the average courtier was aware of this entire second language of scent, or if it was something more subconscious, a sort of ambient semiotics. But one thing is clear, vinegar didn't just live on the body. It saturated the space. You move through a drawing room filled with embroidered cushions and freshly poured cordial, and the air hits you like a scented wall. Rose, vinegar, a whisper of lavender, and something dark, maybe elderberry? This isn't an accident. The room's been pre-treated. Back in the 17th and 18th centuries, elite households didn't just rely on burning herbs or perfumed sachets to freshen a space. They misted vinegar, sprayed it into drapes, dabbed it under furniture, poured it into shallow bowls tucked behind statues. Not just for aesthetics, but to mark territory. Just like dogs, but with much better accessories. One noblewoman even had her corridors regularly scrubbed with rosemary-infused vinegar to banish wicked thoughts. You're not sure it worked, considering she had 3 duels and a paternity scandal in the same summer. Still, she smelled amazing. You catch a servant carrying a tiny silver atomizer, an early version of the spray bottle. He's misting the door frames before a high-ranking cardinal enters the room. You lean close. The blend is heavy on neroli and bergamot, dignified, non-threatening, almost ecclesiastical. The man himself glides in seconds later, flanked by sycophants and candlelight. He nods at the scent like it's an old friend. You start to wonder, did he choose this blend in advance? Or did the host tailor the room for him? And then it hits you, you're not the only one who's been soaking in vinegar. The entire space is part of the performance. The walls, the air, the furniture, all saturated with intention. You slip into the card room where a heated game of basset is underway. 4 players, 2 ladies, 2 gentlemen. The stakes are high enough to draw sweat. And with sweat comes, yes, rapid reapplication. You watch as a lady casually dips her gloved fingertip into a vinaigrette ring. She rubs it along her collarbone, eyes never leaving the table. It's clove and cinnamon, and it cuts through the anxious citrus cloud hanging above the table like a thunderhead. One of her opponents falters. You swear he blinks just a little too long, and she wins the hand. Coincidence? Maybe, but more likely, strategic scent timing. That's something modern poker players don't have in their toolkit. Unless Axe body spray counts, which, let's be honest, it doesn't. You step outside for a moment of fresh air. Even the gardens aren't immune. The hedges have been lightly rinsed in apple cider vinegar and time of detail you recognize now that your nose has graduated to noble levels of paranoia. There's a couple arguing softly beneath a trellis. She smells like grief and violets. He smells like desperate reconciliation, frankincense, and sweet basil. You can't hear all the words, but the scents tell you enough. Someone broke a vow. Someone's trying to fix it. The wind shifts. You give them space. Back inside, a woman compliments your scent apple and anise, remember? You thank her and she smiles, tilting her head. It's very ... sincere. That's a compliment. Or a trap. Hard to say. She leans in, almost conspiratorial. Do you know what they say about sincerity at court? You shake your head. She grins. It's just another kind of costume. One that fools even the wearer. Then she's gone, leaving behind a waft of something smoky and floral. Peony and burnt sugar, maybe. The smell of nostalgia and hidden motives. You're starting to understand the core truth here. Vinegar wasn't a mask, it was a mirror. A way for nobles to explore who they were or who they needed to be that day. Just like how you might dress sharper for a job interview or soften your voice during an apology, they chose vinegar, and they bathed in it to commit fully, to let it sink in, to smell like the version of themselves they were determined to become. Some called it superstition, others called it chemistry, but you call it brilliant, even if it's a little obsessive. As the evening wears on, you notice the shift. People are reapplying more often. The air is thicker, the scents more layered. It's like the atmosphere is blooming with all the vinegar choices made since sunset. Someone passes you wearing something that makes you nostalgic for a memory you don't even have. You close your eyes. And for a moment, you're not just a guest at a French noble party. You're a witness to an entire scent-based society operating in whispers and wafts. A world where the cleanest people were the most dangerous, and the most seductive thing you could wear was your own carefully fermented ambition. The clock strikes something that feels like midnight, but who can tell in a room with no rules and too many chandeliers? You're somewhere between enchanted and slightly dizzy, wrapped in the scent mist of 6 nobles, each carrying a personal storm of fermented intention. You find yourself in a quieter hallway just off the ballroom, but not quite forgotten. A servant nods at you as they pass with a basin of what smells like rosemary and regret, and that's when you see it. A door you haven't noticed before, small, arched, and painted with a kind of care that says, "You're not supposed to notice me," which means, obviously, you do. You push it open, and you walk into the changing room, a staging ground of Vinegar transformations. It's not meant for guests per se. But who are you now, if not something more than that? Inside, it's quiet. Padded benches, gilded mirrors, hooks for wigs and coats, and 3 tall screens hiding behind them, Vinegar bathing stations, low marble basins filled with steaming, scented water with linens neatly folded at the side. Someone's left behind a bottle labeled Amor Perdu. The stopper is warm. Recently used. You pick it up. A whiff and suddenly you're filled with longing for someone you've never met. It smells like heartbreak softened by vanilla. You place it down quickly before you start drafting sad poetry on a lace glove. This room, it's not about getting clean. It's about switching masks mid-party. Because for nobles, one scent wasn't always enough. Depending on what room you entered, what rumor needed guiding, or who you hoped to seduce or destroy, you had to adapt. Historians still debate whether the frequent, mid-party rebathing was common practice or limited to those obsessed with control. But there is plenty of documentation of nobles vanishing for 20 minutes only to return smelling like a different emotion entirely. There is even a scandal from 1742 where 2 lovers met by accident behind one of these very screens only to discover they had both changed into the same scent, Forbidden Orchard. A blend of fig, lemon, and secrecy. The irony was not lost on their respective spouses, who both wore wrath and time that night. And remember, these were no ordinary vinegars. They weren't pickling cucumbers. They were pickling intentions. You hear someone humming. A young woman steps out from behind the screen, drying her hands on a silk cloth. She sees you, startled, then smiles like nothing here is surprising. She smells faintly of moss and ginger, an assertive blend meant for negotiations or veiled threats. She nods to the room. You switching masks too? You ask her how many she wears in a single evening. Depends on the gossip, she says with a shrug. Sometimes I'm the romantic. Sometimes I'm the villain. Tonight, I'm the one with the antidote. You ask what that means. She just winks and disappears through the velvet curtain. This room, you realize, is the scent checkpoint. The noble equivalent of a pit stop fresh blend, new persona, adjusted storyline. And like all things powerful, it was both highly strategic and deeply vulnerable. To be here is to admit that your first scent didn't quite work, that you need a new story. You pick up another bottle, this one labeled Second Chances. It smells like eucalyptus and orange peel, clean, sharp, a little desperate. You wonder how many people used it and actually got what they wanted. Suddenly, you see something small, a journal left under the bench. Curious, you flip through it. It's a scent diary. An actual record. Each entry lists the scent worn, the room entered, the goal, and the outcome. You scan a few. Rose and vinegar, ballroom, target, Lady Emmeline, wanted forgiveness. Outcome, she danced with me but whispered never again. Cedar and lemon, library. Goal, appear wise. Outcome, someone asked me to explain the Treaty of Utrecht. I panicked. Apple and honey, drawing room. Goal, flirtation. Outcome, success. Left with glove and promise. You're reading someone's playbook. Their emotional history rendered in vinegar and hindsight. And you realize scent here isn't just for others. It's for self-reinforcement. You can lie to your reflection. You can fake a smile, but scent ... it clings. It sinks into your skin. And if you smell like confidence long enough, maybe, just maybe, you'll become it. No wonder the nobles bathed in it. They weren't just trying to impress. They were trying to convince themselves. You hear the distant swell of a new minuet and realize the party is peaking again. You're supposed to be back out there. But you linger in the quiet. And that's when you find the strangest bottle yet. It's unlabeled, corked tightly. Its glass is clouded from the inside. You shake it gently and the liquid sloshes with a strange, sluggish rhythm. You know you shouldn't, but you pull the cork. Immediately, the air fills with something you can't describe. It's not floral, not herbal, not fruity. It smells like Memory, yours. You're hit with flashes, summer walks, old libraries, a whisper of your own fear, your own hope. It's like the bottle was waiting for you. Then it's gone. Just vinegar again. You seal it and return it to the shelf. You don't know what that was. But someone bottled something deeply personal, and now you wonder, did every noble have one? A private blend, a secret scent. Not for power or politics, but just to remember who they were beneath the lace and ceremony. You step out of the room back into the hallway. A servant offers you a cloth. Fresh from the lavender rinse, madame, sir, you nod. Dab your hands. And this time, you carry a different scent back with you. Not ambition, not strategy, just curiosity. And maybe a little of your real self. The party is fully molten now, no longer flowing with grace, but dripping with exhaustion, perfume, and people dancing like they're determined not to regret anything in the morning. And maybe that's the point. You step back into the ballroom and it hits you immediately. The scent cocktail has changed. It's thicker, warmer. Gone are the crisp citruses and sharp florals from earlier in the night. Now it's darker amber, myrrh, clove, and something sticky sweet like fermented peaches left out in the sun. It's not unpleasant, just ... closer to honesty. That's the thing about midnight at these gatherings. It's the tipping point where scent stops being a performance and becomes a confession. You ease your way toward the open windows where a few guests have broken off to recover in the breeze. A young marquis is sitting with one boot off, sipping something strong, his coat collar wet with sweat. He smells like smoked wood and faded peppermint, a brave front that's starting to wear through. He glances at you and mutters, "Should have gone with basil. Basil makes me feel clever." That S, the third person tonight, who is referred to a vinegar blend like it S an emotional prescription. And the more you look around, the more you realize people aren't just bathing in vinegar to impress the crowd, they self-medicating. Historians still debate whether the use of scented vinegar for emotional regulation was intentional or incidental. Did nobles mean to use these mixtures as aromatherapeutic tools? Or did the culture simply stumble into a kind of primitive perfume psychology? You sit near the marquis, inhaling the mix of wind and candle smoke. He leans over. "You know what I wore last week?" You raise an eyebrow. "Juniper and fennel." "Because I was supposed to be cruel." You wait, but I couldn't keep it up. "I started smelling like a kitchen." And there it is, that quiet truth. The one you've been circling for hours now. Vinegar was supposed to hide weakness. But sometimes it revealed more than it covered. A lady breezes past in a dress that rustles like whispers. She wears a vinegar infused with crushed lilac and bitter orange peel, hope and bitterness, blended like old letters folded too many times. You wonder how many others in the room are wearing their inner conflict. You wonder if anyone is wearing who they actually are. Another joke floats your way, something about a count who tried to layer 3 vinegars at once and ended up smelling like a pantry having a nervous breakdown. You smile politely, but your mind is elsewhere. Because now you can feel it. The emotional fatigue behind the performance. And vinegar, for all its glamour, isn't just about allure, it's also about armor. Some nobles had signature blends. These were usually the ones who didn't trust themselves to improvise. A consistent scent meant control, predictability, a message that read, "I know who I am and I'm not letting you change it." One duchess, nicknamed La Vinaigrette, famously wore only a single vinegar blend for over a decade: sage, lemon peel, and white pepper. It was said to smell like a monastery inside a citrus grove, austere, decisive, unflinching, at least until the year she disappeared for 3 months, only to return wearing violets and cardamom, fragile, floral, defiant. That shift caused more gossip than 3 divorces and a duel combined. You wander to the refreshment table where half-eaten petit fours sit beside a crystal bowl of vinegar-soaked rose petals meant to cleanse the palate. You take one just to see. It tastes like someone's memory of love, slightly soured. Someone nearby is crying softly, not dramatically, just a quiet little leak of emotions too heavy to hold in. Their friend offers a vinaigrette locket, clicks it open, and lets the scent drift, neroli and chamomile, and just like that, the crying slows. You wonder how many arguments at court were diffused with just a flick of scent. How many schemes lost momentum when one person opened a bottle that made the other remember their wedding day? That's the quiet power here, not the grandeur. The subtle sabotage of the heart. You're beginning to see how deeply these people were invested in their vinegar rituals. They didn't just dab it on like perfume. They built their nights around it. Their intentions. Their battles. Their defenses. And as the music slows, an orchestra sighing into its final movements, you realize something else. The vinegar isn't a luxury anymore. It's a lifeline. You overhear a conversation by the mantel. One noble is explaining how he made his latest blend: elderflower for charm, white vinegar for clarity, a single crushed clove for revenge. He says it like a spell. And maybe it is. Because really, what is a potion? Just vinegar with enough story behind it. Another noble admits she's worn the same scent since her engagement broke off. Not out of sentiment, but as a warning. People understand what it means now. They give her space. And that's the paradox you're restarting to love. In a court obsessed with illusions, scent is the one thing that tells the truth eventually. Not because it wants to, but because your skin can't lie forever. It's midnight in every possible way now. A woman adjusts her hair. A man gives up on his cravat. Two people slip away toward the garden with a bottle of something mysterious between them. Everyone's masks are fading, but the scents remain. Because they cling, even to the liars. Especially to them. And you, standing here with the last petal between your fingers, are beginning to understand why they bathed in vinegar before every party. Not for appearances, but to choose their weapon, to arm themselves in scent. Because when everyone's pretending, the only truth left is what lingers after the performance ends. You move through the palace like a dream, now floaty, weightless, half seduced by every room you pass. Everything is softer. The sharp edges of gossip have dulled. The laughter no longer cuts, it hums. Someone is playing a cello in the distance, and the notes drip like candle wax onto velvet. You find yourself in a library, or what passes for one in noble circles. Not bookshelves so much as walls pretending to be useful. Most of the volumes are decoration. Their leather spines are for show. But in the corner, tucked behind a tapestry, there's a real alcove, dusty, fragrant, alive with pages. You pull a volume at random. The pages fall open to an illustration, a series of glass bottles labeled in looping French script, each with ingredients swirling inside: lavender, thyme, vinegar, powdered amber. The title? Less essences, still humor. The essences of mood. It hits you. This was more than fashion. It was philosophy. You run your fingers along the spines, your fingertips coming away lightly sticky. They've been touched often, used, loved even. The room smells like old paper and oddly faint rosemary. The shelves seem to exhale it like memory. And you realize there were entire manuals devoted to this. Not just perfume recipes, but emotional maps. Guides to curating identity through scent. Which combination for confidence? Which for flirtation? Which to invoke sorrow gently in case one needed to cry in public but make it look pretty. Historians still debate whether these guides were actually used or simply written to sell vinegar as a social elixir. But you're holding one now, and it's full of annotations. Someone treated this like gospel. There's a bookmark on a page titled Mixtures for Dangerous Conversations. The notes read: orange peel to soften bergamot for alertness, clove if there's a chance it turns ugly. You flip again. For receiving bad news, lavender, a touch of sage, and lemon to stay grounded but seem kind. It's astonishing. These people didn't just dress the part. They chemically rehearsed their emotions. And somewhere in this elegant chaos, you find a smaller book. No title, just pressed flowers between the covers, each one brittle, brown-edged, but still fragrant. As if each bloom was once soaked in vinegar and left to tell a story. The front page holds a list, scents paired with names. You recognize some of them. High-ranking nobles, one duchess, two foreign ambassadors. Each associated with a blend. It's a cheat sheet, but why? You scan the scribbles. Marquis d'Yale, always rosemary. Trust if mint is added. The Viscountess wears violet when mourning. When plotting, it's verbena. Do not speak to the bishop if you wear cinnamon. You close the book slowly. This was more than a guide. It was a weapon inventory. In a court where emotions had consequences, knowing someone's scent was knowing their tactical state of mind. There's a strange silence behind you. You turn. A man stands in the doorway, older, wrapped in a coat too fine to belong to a librarian. He nods at the book in your hands. Found my old notes, have you? You start to apologize, but he waves you off. Everyone used to do it, he says. At least the smart ones. You ask if it worked. He chuckles. Until it didn't. Until someone made a scent so subtle it fooled even themselves. You ask what it was. Bitter orange and white lilac. Smelled like purity. Hit every intention. He moves closer. I wore it the night I betrayed 3 friends. Everyone forgave me by morning. There's a pause heavy as velvet. Except me, he adds, quieter now. Turns out vinegar doesn't wash off the soul. You offer the book back, but he declines. Keep it, might help you survive the next room. He turns and vanishes down the hallway without a sound. You're left holding his old playbook, wondering what kind of person documents betrayal and scented flowers. You tuck it into your coat. Somewhere above, a clock chimes midnight. And that's when you remember, Vinegar wasn't just about self-expression or survival. It was about strategy, each blend a calculated risk. Each application a confession with plausible deniability. And now, armed with someone's secrets, you feel like you've crossed into a different layer of the night. You're not just an observer anymore. You've become ... informed. You step back into the hall. A woman passes you wearing something that smells like burnt sugar and frost. It's delicious and chilling. You remember a line from the book. Frosted vanilla for those who wish to seem harmless but leave bruises. You smile. It's almost a relief to know the rules now. To decode the signals. To realize all this time while you were floating on the aesthetics, others were playing chess. And the vinegar? Just one of the pieces. It's nearly 1 a.m, and you can feel it in your bones, even your shadow has started to look tired. But the party hasn't thinned. It's just ... condensed. The big conversations have fallen quiet, replaced by low murmurs and touches that linger just a moment too long. You find yourself back on the garden steps, somewhere between indoors and out. A breeze rolls in, and with it, something unexpected. The smell of vinegar not meant for seduction or status or emotional subterfuge. This one is sharp, medicinal, like you've stepped into an apothecary by accident. You follow it instinctively, like a cat chasing smoke, until you find the source. A servant, sleeves rolled up, tending to a bruised noble's arm. He's dabbing a cloth into a bottle of wine vinegar mixed with thyme and rue. The injured man winces. Is that supposed to help or punish me? The servant replies, deadpan, both, monsieur. You almost laugh, but then it clicks. This isn't just courtly nonsense. This is what vinegar used to be. Before it was bottled into romance and rivalry, vinegar was a healer, a cleanser, a line of defense. It was medicine before it was metaphor. The nobles may have diluted it with petals and pride, but underneath all the layers of rose, oil and clove vinegar remained what it had always been. The thing that kept disease at bay when no one understood why disease happened. Remember, this was a world before germ theory. People didn't know about bacteria or viruses. But they did know that bad air made people die, and vinegar, with its eye-watering punch, seemed to keep that rot at arm's length. Historians still debate whether vinegar actually helped prevent disease or if it just made people feel less helpless in the face of random death. Either way, they carried it like armor. You see it in the little details tonight, nobles with vinegar-drenched handkerchiefs, pressed to their mouths when passing through a crowd. Servants soaking sponges in vinegar and tucking them into wall sconces to purify the air. Even the perfumed vinaigrettes some guests wear double as a ward just in case. You pass a decorative bowl of cut citrus sitting in the corner of a room, half submerged in spiced vinegar. It's not for show, it's there to fight off invisible monsters. And that bowl tells a story louder than any music playing tonight. Because at the core of it, the French noble's vinegar ritual wasn't just vanity, it was fear. Fear of filth. Fear of bad smells. Fear that smell itself might carry death. So they weaponized vinegar. To clean, to disinfect, to draw lines between health and hazard. They soaked their gloves in it. They rinsed their mouths with it. They even dabbed it behind their ears like a lucky charm. It was equal parts ritual, habit, and prayer. You lean against a stone balustrade, and a woman joins you with a nod. She's older, regal without effort, and she's chewing on a sliver of candied ginger. She offers one. You take it. Then, without prompting, she says, "They used to call it plague water." You blink. Vinegar? She nods slowly. During outbreaks, they'd steep it with lavender, sage, and rosemary. It stank like a grandmother's fury, but we drank it anyway. Rubbed it on our wrists, bathed in it if we could afford it. You ask if it worked. Who knows? She shrugs. But it gave us something to do besides panic. And sometimes that's all you need. The phrase sticks with you, plague water. It has a certain elegance for something born of desperation. And it makes you wonder how much of tonight's glitter is still laced with that same nervous magic. After all, the line between vanity and survival is thin when you're rich, terrified, and surrounded by rumors of contagion. You spot a valet discreetly refreshing a vinegar-soaked sachet in the corner of the ballroom. No one notices. It is like watching someone sprinkle salt over a wound and pretend it is part of the decor. Even the food reflects this paranoia. Pickled fruits. Vinegar-glazed meats. Tart wines, its flavor and preservation. Because vinegar doesn't just protect your body. It preserves the illusion of control. That's what this whole night has been, hasn't it? 1,000 ways to avoid acknowledging how fragile everything is. They decorate the rot, but they know it's there. You remember the scent one noble wore earlier: rosemary, thyme, and astringent white vinegar. You thought it was bold. Now you realize it was anxious. Like someone saying, "Don't come too close." A younger man stumbles by, slightly drunk, complaining about his aching feet. A friend offers him a vinegar foot bath, and they both laugh, but they do it anyway. Because somewhere in the back of their minds, they've been taught vinegar equals safety. Even if it burns. Even if it smells like your grandmother's warning. Even if it doesn't work. You watch another guest excuse herself from the crowd and pull a tiny cloth-wrapped bundle from her sleeve. She unties it, presses it to her nose, inhales deeply, then breathes out slower than before. You smell lemon peel, cinnamon, and something medicinal, wormwood maybe. She returns to the room, spine straighter. The nobles aren't just drunk on perfume and drama tonight. They're clinging to rituals that make them feel clean, safe, distant from decay. And vinegar? It's the last defense against a world they don't understand. You look around again with new eyes. You see a ballroom built on panic disguised as elegance. You see whispers of death met with satin gloves soaked in scent. You see a society that's turned its fear into fashion. And you realize you've never been more impressed. The clock is ticking louder now. You swear it didn't echo like this earlier, but everything feels different in the late hours. More echo, more hush, more breath between every note. You're back in the main hall, and even the chandeliers look a little droopier, as if they too are winding down. You pass a group of nobles lounging like half-melted sculptures across velvet couches. Their conversation is slow, hushed, with the occasional flutter of a fan or peal of dry laughter. One of them is dabbing her wrist with vinegar and crushed violet petals, murmuring about balance and digestion. Another claims vinegar saved her from a fainting spell earlier that week. A third, clearly a few glasses past rationality, insists vinegar can revive a dead mouse if you whisper kindly while applying. The others nod as if this is not only believable but likely. You sit nearby, close enough to listen, invisible enough not to interrupt. They're talking about tonics, now vinegar-based concoctions their families have sworn by for generations. You can't help but smile. You're hearing the folk wisdom part of the story. The bedtime legends that survived every perfume bottle and marble-tiled vanity. These weren't just beauty rituals, they were home remedies. Passed down, whispered, sometimes in dialects that barely made it out of the village. You hear one noble recount how their grandmother used to soak onions in vinegar and place them under the bed to absorb illness. Another shares how her mother made her gargle a mix of vinegar and honey every time she so much as coughed. Then the group dissolves into a debate. Was it apple vinegar or wine vinegar that worked better for fevers? Did it need to be infused with sage? Or was that only for heartbreak? Historians still debate how much of this lore was medically sound and how much was placebo or just cultural placebo. But for centuries, vinegar was the poor man's cure and the nobleman's crutch. The one thing they shared, even if their bottles looked different. You remember something now: how vinegar was once used to treat lice. How it was poured into basins to purify coins and letters. How monks would wear vinegar-soaked cloths under their robes during epidemics, praying and dripping in equal measure. It was more than a treatment. It was a belief system, and you get it. There's something poetic about a liquid that stings, cleans, and lingers. The nobles keep talking. One confesses she keeps a vial of clove and vinegar blend in her bodice, in case of unexpected confrontation. You think she's joking, but she doesn't laugh. Another talks about morning vinegar, a tradition in some regions where widows would soak their hairbrushes in rosemary vinegar every morning until their grief was declared socially expired. You lean back and let it wash over you. The scent in this room is something else now, thick with aged herbal tones and sharp acid. It doesn't smell like elegance anymore. It smells like memory, and not all of it is beautiful. You see, vinegar is preservative by nature, but it doesn't freeze time. It suspends it. Holds it in place just long enough to understand it, fear it, maybe survive it. And for French nobles, that meant bottling everything, their health, their heartbreaks, their rivalries, their reputations, all of it preserved in glass. A man across the room pulls a small bottle from his pocket. Its contents shimmer strangely greenish and amber all at once. He holds it up like a toast and says, "This was my mother's remedy for lying suitors." The others laugh. Then he uncorks it, dabs some behind each ear, and says, "I like to think it still works." And that's when it lands for you. This wasn't just a trend, it was inheritance. You realize how much of this strange tradition wasn't learned from court tutors or perfumers, but from grandmothers in crumbling kitchens, from housekeepers who survived plagues and heartbreaks and still made vinegar from scratch because store-bought wasn't to be right. You think of all the noble children taught how to test vinegar with a feather, how to recognize when it's turned sour, how to whisper a prayer over it before applying it to a wound or a secret. You think of the line between science and superstition being blurred not in books but in habits, the kind passed down without ever being questioned. There is a phrase in old French herbal manuals, "Le vinaigre sait ce que tu caches." Vinegar knows what you hide, and that's the core of it, isn't it? Vinegar reveals. In a world of masks and powdered intentions, it cuts through. Whether that's skin, bacteria, or pretense, it doesn't care. It shows you what's real, or what you're trying to preserve too long. You close your eyes for a moment. Try to remember the smell of the first bottle you encountered tonight. Was it apple or wine? Clove or lavender? You can't recall. It's been drowned by layers of others like voices in a crowded hallway, each one sharp, each one personal. You stand up again, ready to leave the room, but the nobles stop you. "Wait," one says. "You didn't tell us yours." You blink. "My what?" "Your vinegar blend," she says, smiling like a cat in lace. "Everyone has one, or they should." You pause, think, and then you answer, slow and sleepy. "Lemon peel, black pepper." "Maybe mint?" She nods. Clever, defensive, but still curious. You're not sure what that means, but you take it as a compliment. You leave them there, half gossip, half ghost, and walk back into the corridor, your mind steeped in old recipes and stranger truths. The air shifts again. You feel something is ending, or fermenting, and you're not sure which one is worse. The corridors have quieted. The firelight throws long, trembling shadows, and your footsteps now echo like you've wandered into a cathedral. But this isn't a place of worship, not exactly. Unless you consider vanity a kind of faith, which, honestly, you're starting to. You pass a mirror framed in tarnished gold. For a moment, you catch your reflection and wonder how much vinegar has clung to your skin, your clothes, even your thoughts. You've been breathing it for hours. Maybe days, if you count how deeply you've been inhaling history. But what do you really know about these nobles? Not just their rituals, their recipes, their midnight baths, but their real faces, what happens when the perfumed gloves come off. Tonight, you'll see it. Because you're heading toward the rooms the party wasn't supposed to reach. Private quarters. Dressing rooms, lounges stacked with silks and secrets. And in one of them, behind an ajar door, you glimpse something that stops you cold. A noblewoman, no wig, no rouge, no practiced posture, sits hunched out of vanity. She's wiping her face clean with something dark and pungent. You recognize the glint of a vinegar bottle beside her, but the smell is unfamiliar, earthy, bitter. She catches your eyes in the mirror and doesn't flinch. "Walnut husk vinegar," she says, voice like rustling linen. "For the sins of the day." You don't know whether to apologize or ask for a chair. She gestures to a stool and keeps scrubbing. Her skin, under all the layers, is mottled, not disease, just real. A constellation of age, emotion, exhaustion. All the things the ballroom light refuses to show. She dabs a bit of rose vinegar on her temples and sighs. "It stings," she says. "But it reminds me I'm still under this costume." You realize as she speaks that vinegar isn't just medicine or perfume or protection. It's a mirror, it reveals. It preserves, it cleans you down to what's left. And what's left is sometimes uncomfortable. Historians still debate whether vinegar rituals are more about health or about control, a way to hold on to identity when status, body, and beauty were constantly under siege. You ask her if it ever feels like too much. She laughs. "Of course it is, that's the point." Then, almost kindly, she says, "The vinegar doesn't lie. It doesn't flatter. It makes you sharp again, and you feel it. That edge. Because beneath all the lace and fan-fluttering flirtation, this culture built something knife-like into its femininity. A readiness. A resilience. A recipe. The noblewoman starts to brush her hair. It's longer than you expected, darker. She dips her comb into a mixture of rosemary vinegar and spring water. For shine, she murmurs. And to keep things ... away. You ask what things means. She doesn't answer. Just looks at you in the mirror and smiles like someone who's seen a ghost and decided to host tea. There are bottles everywhere on her vanity. Glass flasks, ceramic jugs, carved wooden stoppers. Some are labeled in neat script. Wound vinegar, garden night, memory, for letters not sent. You read that last one twice. It's not just cleaning. It's ritual. Private, sometimes petty, sometimes sacred. She offers you a bottle. Just to smell. You unstop it. Clove, burnt orange, something smoky, maybe charcoal? Punishment vinegar, she says, before you can ask. For when I want to smell like I don't forgive, you cough a laugh. Then nod, because yeah, there are people you'd wear that for too. The bottle next to it is sweeter lavender, honey vinegar, a little myrtle. For visiting graves. This is deeper than you expected, more personal. You feel like you've stumbled into someone's diary and decided to take a nap on the margins. She tells you how vinegar helped her mother during childbirth, how it cured a dog's infection once, how she watched a man faint at a funeral and be revived with a vinegar-soaked rag. You sit and let it all settle. In these quiet corners, vinegar stops being symbolic and starts being real, real enough to hold memories, real enough to sting old wounds, real enough to become part of your identity. You wonder how many nobles have a morning vinegar, how many wear one for breakups, how many pass down recipes with a tone reserved for holy text. You realize these bottles were their archives. Not in the official sense, no treaties or royal records, but in the emotional sense. The way a song becomes 2005, the way perfume becomes a person, the way vinegar becomes a wound you cleaned so well you kept the rag. Before you leave, she says something that sticks. Always keep one bottle that hurts to use. That way you'll know you're still changing. You thank her and leave. Back in the hallway, the air feels different again. Like the atmosphere has shifted one ingredient. You wonder how many rooms hold stories like hers. How many people at this party are covered in vinegar and secrets, clinging to rituals that started out as hygiene and became something more poetic. You pass a young man brushing something off his coat cinders from a candle, maybe. He mutters about needing rosewater vinegar, the kind that makes you remember who you are. You nod, because you're starting to understand. This isn't just about why nobles bathe in vinegar before parties. It's about why they needed to. Because the party wasn't just about looking beautiful. It was about looking in control. And nothing gives you control quite like a sting that you chose. There's a hush in the corridors now, but not the kind that makes you sleepy. It's the kind that settles just before a confession. You can almost hear the house itself sighing, exhausted by all the secrets it's held in crystal bottles and monogrammed jars. But you keep going, drawn deeper, because you haven't yet reached the end of the story, not yours, not theirs. You step into another room, this one dim and lined with cabinets. And suddenly, it's not perfume or medicine that hits you, it's vinegar in its rawest form. Sharp, bracing, the kind that makes your eyes water and your shoulders hunch, like you've just stepped into a memory you didn't ask for. This is the storage chamber. Here, the nobles don't entertain. They don't gossip or flirt or confess heartbreaks over tonic bowls. This is where the base materials live. It smells like earth and rot and transformation. Like one that gave up on its dreams of elegance and decided to bite instead. You run your hand over one of the barrels. Oak, stained deep and dark, sealed tight. Some have dates carved into them. Some are labeled in spidery cursive, for plague, for ambassadors, for mistresses who do not leave. You pause at that last one. The further in you go, the clearer it becomes. This is alchemy. Not the kind with golden lid, but the kind that turns decay into ritual, waste into wisdom. Grapes into vinegar and vinegar into something almost holy. One shelf holds bundles of herbs, long dried and brittle. Lavender, thyme, hyssop, rue. Some dipped into vinegar already, some waiting like offerings. You pick up a sprig wrapped in linen. When you lift it to your nose, it smells faintly of sweat and ghosts. And suddenly, you see all the full arc of this strange, sour ritual. From the laborers who harvested grapes with calloused hands, to the apothecaries who whispered recipes like spells, to the nobles who bottled identity into little vials before stepping into powdered shoes, everyone had a part to play. And everyone, in some way, got preserved. Historians still debate whether vinegar storage rooms like this were common or elite eccentricities. But there are enough records, ledgers, lists, personal diaries to suggest that nearly every chateau had one. Or at least every household with aspirations of survival and sophistication. You picture a countess, somewhere in Burgundy, pacing in a vinegar-slicked robe while servants decant the latest vintage of wound vinegar from a cracked barrel. You picture the recipe book she keeps hidden in a velvet pouch. Add juniper, add patience, stir with silver. Apply when betrayed. This was more than hygiene, it was forecasting. They prepared for fevers, for famine, for heartbreak, for enemies with poisoned pens. And they did it with vinegar sometimes infused with garlic, sometimes mixed with ashes, sometimes so potent it had to be handled with gloves. You find a scroll tucked behind a row of flasks. Its edges are stiff with age and vinegar-stained fingerprints. You unroll it carefully. It's a list, but not of ingredients, of names, a family line. Next to each name, a blend. Antoinette, apple, sage, bloodroot. Matilda, white wine, lilac. Birch, Etienne, red vinegar, pepper, lavender. It's a vinegar genealogy. A lineage in liquids. Each blend capturing a person more than any portrait ever could. You start to think, what would your vinegar say? Would it sting too much? Would it smell like protection or penance? You feel humbled standing in this room. Because you see now, this isn't just about French nobles bathing before parties. It's about what happens when you try to bottle identity, grief, power, memory, and the hope of survival and rub it into your skin before stepping into a world that judges everything. It's about transformation. Vinegar begins as something sweet, something soft. Wine, fruit, joy. And then it's left alone, to ferment, to change. And that change makes it useful. That's the truth hidden in every noblewoman's vial, every apothecary's shelf, every whispered cure for a heartbreak that won't leave. The transformation isn't always pleasant. Sometimes it stinks, sometimes it hurts. But it gets you ready. That's why they bathed in it. Not just for health or fashion or smell, but because they were stepping into rooms full of danger, emotional, political, sometimes literal, and they needed to feel sharp, alive, preserved, even if it meant stinging every open wound before the music started. You close the scroll, place it back. As you walk out, the barrel room doesn't feel like a cellar anymore. It feels like a chapel, not silent, just reverent. Everything in here was meant to last, even if no one remembered why. You breathe in one last sharp note of vinegar-soaked thyme. Let it burn a little in your throat. Let it remind you that the past doesn't have to be pretty to be powerful. You step back into the hallway, and the sound of the party is fading. Not because it ended, but because you've moved somewhere deeper. You're almost at the end now. Almost preserved. You leave the cellar with a nose full of vinegar and something heavier. The weight of what it meant to live in that world. Not just to survive plagues and parties, but to maintain a version of yourself so specific, so distilled, that even your scent was scripted. Back in the corridors, the palace has changed again. Not physically, though. The candlelight feels lower and the silence a bit more pronounced, but emotionally. You're no longer peeking behind curtains. You've seen what you weren't supposed to, and instead of feeling like an outsider, you feel complicit. You turn a corner and find one last room. It's small, warm. A velvet bench sits beneath a window, and beside it, an open journal. There's a half-finished bottle of rose vinegar on the table. You hesitate, then sit. The journal is written in looping French. The ink is old, faded brown like tea left too long. But the words are tender, honest, less polished than the powdered wigs and lace would suggest. They say vinegar is for the skin, for the rot, for the stink of the world, but I use it for remembering, for becoming sharper, for letting go without forgetting. You close the journal softly. It's like you just heard someone whisper a secret through time, so let's do what they did. Let's remember. Let's go all the way back for one last ride. You were dropped into the powdered heart of French aristocracy, a place where status was stitched into every sleeve and every sneeze could cause a scandal. where noblewomen wore dresses that required scaffolding, and noblemen powdered their wigs with crushed starch and a straight face. You saw their parties. But more than that, you saw what they did before the parties. That's where the truth was. And it started with vinegar. They didn't just splash it around like salad dressing. They bathed in it, gargled it, rubbed it into their hands and hair, their feet and fears. They believed it warded off disease, disguised body odor, and perhaps most importantly, projected control. Because being a noble in 18th century France wasn't relaxing. It was performance art with real stakes. A misplaced laugh could cost you a marriage proposal. A bad smell? Social exile. So vinegar became their quiet little rebellion. Their defense, their signature. Remember the ladies with lavender vinegar tucked into lockets? Or the men dabbing rosemary and wine under their cravats to smell more philosophical? How about the old noblewoman in the dressing room face raw, eyes sharp telling you vinegar didn't flatter, but it never lied? Even their recipes held stories. Juniper for fear, mint for grief, sage for resilience. And sometimes a little apple peel because joy deserves preservation too. Historians still debate whether all this was mostly about vanity or medicine. But honestly, does it matter? They were trying to stay alive, not just biologically, but socially, psychologically, emotionally. And you? You're trying to do the same thing. We still have rituals. Face serums and playlists and mantras and memes. But back then their ritual was vinegar. Liquid history. Tangy, clingy, unforgettable. And here's the weirdest part. It worked. Not because vinegar cured every illness or solved every scandal, but because it made them feel a little more real in a world made of mirrors and masks. And now that you've soaked in that world, now that it's soaked into you, maybe you understand why. Because vinegar doesn't ask to be liked. It just is. It stings, it sharpens, it sticks. And sometimes that is exactly what you need before you walk into a room full of people pretending they aren't afraid. So, before you go to sleep tonight, think of one thing you'd bottle if you could. Would it be bold like clove, soft like rose? Would it hurt a little going on? Whatever it is, let it be something that holds you like vinegar held them. Preserved, yes, but not pickled. Not frozen, just remembered. And you know what? That's kind of beautiful. Now turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soft background music, and let's enjoy our evening ride together. Over the course of 22 dreamlike chapters, you wandered through candlelit corridors and satin-draped salons not to gawk at the splendor of French aristocracy, but to sniff out something far stranger, why they bathed in vinegar before stepping into the ballroom. At first, it seemed simple. Vinegar killed germs, covered up body odor, kept the 18th century stench of city life at bay. But the deeper you went, the more you realized this wasn't just about hygiene, it was a ritual, a spell, a defense mechanism. A form of emotional armor in a world that demanded perfection from people who were falling apart in powdered silence. You met apothecaries who brewed vinegar like poetry, noblewomen who kept recipes in their corsets, and whispered stories hidden in linen-wrapped vials. You saw vinegar used to heal wounds, disguise grief, preserve memory, and sharpen the self. The most revealing truth? These people weren't just preserving their bodies, they were preserving themselves. Each bottle, each blend was a fragment of identity. Love, betrayal, grief, fear, all distilled into scent. So why did French nobles bathe in vinegar before parties? Because the world they walked into didn't allow for vulnerability. And vinegar, in its sting and simplicity, reminded them who they were beneath the silk and masks. Now, as the story fades and sleep begins to tug gently at your mind, maybe you'll remember this. Even something as sour as vinegar can be a form of love. Even rituals that sting can help you survive. And somewhere in history's shadows, someone like you once stood in front of a mirror, dipped their fingers in a sharp little bottle, and said quietly, stubbornly, beautifully, "I'm still here. So sleep well, friend. You're preserved."